Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 661, Return to the Heavenly Eagle Prairie. Back when Zen rescued Craig and his tribe from the ogres' pasture, he had taken them with him and handed them over to one of the forces of the human race. The ordinary herdsmen were able to assimilate into this group easily. And now, Craig had also become a martial artist. He had also, surprisingly, reached the bone refining level. The tribe had not forgotten Zen, though they now understood that he was a warrior rather than a god. After some interaction with other people of their race, the herdsmen no longer confined to themselves and had come to know the martial art world and the situation of the entire sea god continent. But, even after opening their eyes to the reality outside of the pasture, they still regarded Zen as a kind of god or miraculous warrior sent by the heavens to save them. If it wasn't for him, they would still be living in that pasture, kept as food for the ogres. Where is he? Tell me quickly, Craig asked earnestly as he shook the little girl's shoulder. The other herdsmen had also gotten out of their tents and gathered together after hearing what the little girl said. However, Craig was already a martial artist at the bone refining level and his hands already contained great strength. The little girl's face immediately turned red with Craig shaking her violently. Craig, stop, one of the herdsmen scolded. She won't be able to speak if you shake her like that. Craig realized the sense in his fellow herdsman's words. He realized he was too excited and immediately released the little girl from his grip. The little girl rubbed her shoulder and glared at Craig. She huffed before pointing towards a certain direction in the sky, over there. I saw him head towards there. The direction she pointed at was the exact same place that Zen had first appeared on this land, which wasn't far from the pasture they had first come from. Although the entire Heavenly Eagle Prairie now belonged to the human race, the tribe still avoided that pasture because of all the bad memories. Whoosh! The moment she pointed where she had seen him, Craig immediately shot out like an arrow. Since he had reached the bone refining level, he now had absolute control over his bones and could cross great distances with absolute agility. The other herdsmen were also excited. They hadn't gotten the chance to thank Zen back then when he saved their lives. These pastures belonged to the Purple Heart Sacred Place and everyone on the Sea God continent knew of Zen's name. There was news of him every now and then, but the herdsmen understood that, given the difference between their status, it would be extremely difficult for them to see Zen. They knew very well that, try as they might, they would never be able to set foot in the legendary Tower of Sin. Even someone like Craig did not have the slightest possibility of ever entering that tower. The Tower of Sin, after all, was a place where all the Sea God continent's talents gathered. Even human-level talents were considered the lowest-ranked warriors there. And many warriors couldn't even be counted as talents. There was really no way they could ever hope of getting inside. This was the only chance for them to see Zen. Amber landed softly on the ground, her purple robe billowing against the wind. Her aloof and detached eyes swept across the prairie as if looking for something. As a powerful master at the Soul Sea realm, she had an acute sense of perception. After a few seconds, her eyes immediately widened. She had managed to effortlessly pinpoint the giant transmission array hidden under the prairie. She pointed towards the distance. The transmission array is there. Zen looked to where she was pointing at and his gaze landed on a large crater nearby. It was the place where he had first fallen into this continent. The damage caused by the impact of his landing was still very apparent despite the crater having already been covered by weeds. Right here, Miguel, the leader of the Purple Heart Sacred Place, had also landed on the prairie. The silk ribbon that was tied to his robe made him look like an immortal as it fluttered in the wind. After confirming the location of the transmission array, Miguel suddenly raised his hands and slammed them down the ground with an earth-shaking force. Pa! The turf around Miguel began to roll up as if a layer of skin was being lifted from the earth. Underneath the turf was a massive transmission array. The powerful masters from the Purple Heart Sacred Place and the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place slowly descended. A lot of masters came. Except for those at the Soul Sea realm, numerous war sages and human warriors came along with Esther, Olivia, and Yolanda. Today was the day Zen returned to the Heavenly Eagle Prairie. Today he returned to the Heavenly Eagle Prairie, and it was the day he left this continent. The leaders of the two great sacred places had come to see him off. In the entire Sea God continent, only Zen was entitled to such treatment. Everything was settled in the Tower of Sin. The Demon Knight and the human race each had two top-level warlords in the Tower of Sin. Fabian from the human race and Elder May from the Demon Knight had both become war sages. Both races were also planning to explore the Dark Nether Cave once again. Fabian had tried his very best to convince Zen to stay, at least until after the exploration of the Dark Nether Cave. However, Zen was pressed for time. Through his intensive cultivation, Zen had made a lot of breakthroughs and was now a fully fledged warlord. Given enough time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to become a top-level warlord, but he just did not have that kind of luxury. When he left the central region, Zen had been aware that he did not have much time left to save Yan. He consistently worried every day about his sister. No one knew when the next purple power body would appear, and there was no telling when Eddie would manage to find one. Zen only hoped that Eddie would not find the next purple power body so soon. All good things must come to an end, Miguel sighed as he cupped his hands together in front of Zen. Mr. Luo, today, we can only send you here. Who knew that Zen's sudden appearance in the Sea God continent would entail so much change for the entire human race? The Purple Heart sacred place that Miguel led was no doubt the top beneficiary of his arrival. He was extremely grateful to Zen but knew he could not force him to say. All he could do was travel the long distance and see him off with good graces and hopeful wishes. It should be noted that war sages and warriors above the war sage level in the Sea God continent did not use transmission arrays, so he truly did travel long and far. Amber and the other Demon Knight warriors suddenly bent their knee. "My queen," Amber said, addressing Lavender who stood beside Zen. "I hope you return to the throne as soon as possible. If you encounter any danger, no matter where you are, our Heavenly Feather sacred place will rally forth in full strength and support you." Amber did not say this out of courtesy. After finding out that Zen was about to leave, the Heavenly Feather sacred place had created a message rune that they had placed upon both Zen's hand and Lavender's statue. If Lavender ever needed the help of the Heavenly Feather sacred place, all she needed to do was ask and their warriors would immediately drop everything and come to her aid. Lavender nodded with a calm expression. "I see," she replied. Yolanda's colorful skirt fluttered in the air. "I hope your choice is correct," she said to Zen in a faint voice. "We will meet again one day." Until now, Yolanda was still conflicted with her choice of handing over the heavenly fragment over to Zen. Although her stand was different from that of Mist, she understood that handing the fragment over to someone fated to lead the world of chaos was the best choice. However, serious disputes still existed among several lords in the upper world. She was worried if Zen would one day stand on the opposite side against her. Yolanda's soul split spell divided her soul all over the continent. Her main body had reached the peak of the upper world. As long as Zen remained on the path of martial arts, he would meet with her again sooner or later. Zen nodded at her words. Then, the two top-level warlords took out Supreme Life Vitality crystals and began to place them onto the massive transmission array. The transmission array consumed a large amount of Supreme Life Vitality crystals, but the Purple Heart sacred place had no problem bearing the cost. At that moment, a figure appeared at the edge of the prairie and seemed to be running towards Zen at an extremely fast rate. It looked like the figure was a young man from the human race, and over 100 herdsmen followed behind him. Esther calmly gazed at the approaching herd. She remarked, dropping her guard once she realized that the human warrior was only at the bone refining level. "Stop them," Miguel ordered. They weren't going to let a handful of herdsmen disturb them at such a crucial moment. A few of top-level warlords were preparing to stop them. However, Zen waved his hand. "No, let them come to me." Chapter 662, Please accept me as your disciple. It was the boy from the pasture, Craig. When Zen had first arrived at the Sea God continent, none of the herdsmen had dared to resist the ogres, but this boy, Craig, had stood bravely next to him, showing his determination to fight against the enemy. Given his strength, Craig wouldn't stand a chance, but it took a lot of courage to stand his ground knowing that the outcome would be bad for him. He was the only one who had dared to take a step forward while all the other humans stood to one side and trembled in fear. Now, Craig couldn't tell the cultivation levels of the people in front of him. It was said that war fighters could fly in the air, so they must be stronger than war fighters. However, Craig also knew that his guess wasn't accurate. His nomadic tribe had war fighters, but their auras weren't anywhere near as strong as the auras of the people in front of him. Perhaps even the weakest of them are war generals, Craig thought to himself. He rushed forward with his sparkling eyes fixed firmly on Zen and knelt on the ground. I'm a martial artist now. Please accept me as your disciple. Craig's sincere request caused all of the top-level warlords present, including Miguel and Amber, to laugh. In their eyes, this human boy was simple and adorable. Hearing Craig's request, Zen shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't accept disciples. What's more, I'm about to leave this place. Your cultivation is too low for you to be able to pass through the long-distance transmission array. However, Craig was more persistent than Zen had imagined. Still kneeling, he said, I'll follow you even if I have to risk my life. Ho ho, this boy is so determined. A top-level warlord said. Craig had actually already begged Zen to accept him as his disciple when Zen had first arrived at the Sea God continent, but Zen had refused at that time. And now, in the situation he was in, Zen couldn't establish his own clan, let alone accept disciples. Zen had no choice but to refuse Craig once again. But Craig seemed to have no intention of standing up until his request was accepted. At this moment, one of the top-level warlords of the human race said to Craig, clearly, he doesn't want to accept you as his disciple. How about being my disciple instead? Craig had just reached the bone refining level, so he didn't have the qualifications to join the Purple Heart Sacred Place. Even the simplest entrance exam would be hard for him to pass. Therefore, having a top-level warlord as his master would be considered a great honor for him. It was obvious that the human top-level warlord wanted to curry favor with Zen. Although Zen was about to leave, he had a lot of influence in the Purple Heart Sacred Place, so there would be no harm in doing so. After all, what if Zen returned to the Sea God continent one day? Craig looked up and shook his head. No, I only want to take the true God as my master. The warriors all raised their eyebrows in surprise. They'd never thought that Craig would be so persistent. He wanted to be Zen's disciple so much that he wasn't even willing to accept a top-level warlord as his master. However, Zen still shook his head. As I said, I'm going to leave this place. Even if I accept you as my disciple, it won't do you any good. But, Craig looked up at Zen, as if searching for the right words in his mind. Miguel laughed. I'd like to accept you as my disciple. What do you think? At his words, many of the top-level warlords' expressions changed. Miguel rarely accepted disciples. Even Olivia, the most outstanding talent of the Purple Heart Sacred Place, hadn't been able to become his disciple. Even if Craig improved his talent tenfold, he still wouldn't be qualified to become Miguel's disciple. Everyone had sharp eyes and had sized Craig up as soon as they'd seen him. In their view, Craig's bone refining level was not a problem. Despite having a low cultivation level, a person could make fast progress in the future as long as he was talented. After he entered the Tower of Sin, his cultivation speed would soar in no time. But Craig wasn't talented and his physical condition wasn't satisfactory. This was the biggest problem. Because of this, Miguel had just been joking when he'd asked Craig to be his disciple. He thought that since Craig was so determined, he wouldn't change his mind and take any master other than Zen. After all, given Craig's cultivation level, it would be impossible for him to tell who was stronger among the people present. Miguel thought that in Craig's eyes, Miguel and the first top-level warlord had probably reached the same level. However, Miguel had underestimated Craig. Craig was crafty and observant. As soon as he heard Miguel's proposal, he hurriedly nodded. Since the true God won't take me as his disciple, I'm willing to be your disciple instead. It was true that Craig couldn't distinguish the difference in strength between Miguel and the top-level warlord, but he was sensible and good at gauging people's thoughts. When the top-level warlord had asked Craig to be his disciple, the crowd's expressions didn't change at all. However, when this middle-aged man in a robe had asked him the same question, all of their expressions had changed. It was obvious to Craig that this man must be an extraordinary figure. But he had no idea that Miguel was the leader of the Purple Heart Sacred Place. When Craig readily agreed to Miguel's proposal, the crowd burst into hearty laughter. Amber faintly smiled and said, "Miguel, you can't go back on your word." Miguel smiled. "I definitely won't go back on my word." Then, he turned to Craig. "Being my disciple will be a tough task. You must prepare yourself for the training." If the many talents of the Purple Heart Sacred Place found out that Miguel had taken a young boy of bone refining level as his disciple because of a joke, they would probably pass out in shock and depression. In fact, Olivia, Dylan, and the others already felt like they were going to faint. At the beginning, Olivia, the #1 talent of the Purple Heart Sacred Place, had asked 2 elders to try to persuade Miguel to take her as his disciple. Out of the millions of martial artists in the Purple Heart Sacred Place, she was the martial artist with the highest talent. Even so, she'd been rejected by Miguel. One could only imagine how surprised she was now. Then, over 100 herdsmen rushed to the scene. They weren't as bold as Craig, so they came to a stop far away and kowtowed to Zen. It was obvious that their gratitude to Zen was sincere and devout. The Supreme Life Vitality crystals on the massive transmission array were finally laid down. Then, a blazing white light cut the transmission array in half, forming a massive line before shooting up into the sky. The large transmission array was finally opened. "It's time to leave," Zen said as Lavender's figure turned into Sword Spirit and drilled into his body. Then, he turned around and bid farewell to everyone before stepping into the transmission array. As Olivia watched Zen's figure disappear into the blazing white light, her eyes, which were filled with tender emotions, suddenly turned red. She might have a lot of things to say to Zen, but it was already an extravagant request for her to send him off at a time like this. How would she even get the opportunity to speak to him alone? Besides, even if she had an opportunity, where would she start from? Could she say that she wanted to follow Zen into the transmission array? This was obviously impossible. The light of the transmission array extended all the way into the distance until it reached the horizon. It drew a parabola in the sky and finally disappeared over the horizon. Miguel looked at the light and said, "I wonder just where this transmission array will lead to. Perhaps in the future, we may be able to enter the transmission array too," Amber said indifferently. The Sea God continent was actually a very barren continent. In terms of wealth and area, it was far from the central region. However, a dozen sacred places were located on that continent, while the central region did not have a single sacred place. The Tower of Sin was the reason for that. It was because of the existence of the Tower of Sin and the Dark Nether Cave that there were so many sacred places in the Sea God continent. As Zen sped through the space channel, thoughts raced through his mind. The central region was his main battlefield. He had finally returned after receiving training in the Sea God continent for almost 2 years. Chapter 663, A Rare Treasure. The turbulent waters of the sea constantly lapped against the reefs on the shore. The chaotic ocean of stars had been raging for most of the year, as it had been like this for centuries. There were countless fierce beasts lurking in this sea. Even the known warriors didn't dare to recklessly enter this sea, let alone ordinary fishermen. Only the really strong warriors dared to explore this sea. After all, there were many treasures hidden in the chaotic ocean of stars, along with the countless corpses of warriors who died in the sea every year. The Fish Dragon sect was a third-grade sect. As it was located in the proximity of chaotic ocean of stars in the Far East, this sect had a much greater understanding of it than any other sects. This sect had pinpointed several sea areas near the continent. They knew very well that although the chaotic ocean of stars was very dangerous, it was relatively safe in the several sea areas they had circled. At least, seldom did powerful beasts appear out of these few sea areas. Every year at the onset of spring, the Fish Dragon sect would send multiple disciples to the surrounding areas to improve their strength through a vigorous training. The mission of the training was to kill a certain level 4 beast in the water called Black Cyan Clam. Although it wasn't very strong in terms of attack, its defensive power was terrifying. It wasn't an easy task to break the shell of the Black Cyan Clam. After killing the Black Cyan Clam, the warriors would get a chance of discovering a treasure called Black Spirit Pearl. It was a very precious material to refine pills, very popular in the markets of the central region. Its demand usually exceeded the supply. It was also one of the main sources of income for the Fish Dragon sect. In addition to the Black Spirit Pearl, the meat of the Black Cyan Clam was also a popular delicacy. After it was caught, it was dried and sold to the central region at very high rates due to its exclusivity. Today was the day the disciples of the Fish Dragon sect were starting their training. Over 10,000 disciples in the illuminating soul realm flew along the sea level. Barnard, our mission is to discover at least 10 Black Spirit Pearls. If we don't complete the mission, we will be punished. The one who spoke was a man dressed in black from top to bottom. There was a black scorpion tattoo on the man's right cheek, granting him a gloomy aura. In the surrounding seas, there were many dangers even for illuminating soul realm warriors. This was why they always traveled in groups of 3 or 4 while entering the chaotic ocean of stars. The man who had spoken was among a group of 5 people. Finally, they began to hunt for the black cyan clams. Compared to the other disciples of the fish dragon sect, these 5 seemed to have a much stronger and malicious aura. "My luck isn't so bad today. I think I've found something," said the warrior named Barnard, his eyes lit as he dove into the water below. The other 2 men looked at each other, then pulled out some water-avoiding pills from their pockets and took them at the same time. Soon, an invisible membrane formed all around their bodies to protect them from the seawater when they dove in. But this membrane was only effective in regions of shallow water. Its thin surface would be immediately folded and wrecked by the deep waters. Plop, plop, the water splashed as the 2 illuminating Soul Realm warriors rushed into the sea, one from the left and the other from the right. The division of labor was clear in the group, which was why they worked closely and with good cooperation. In fact, these 5 warriors were originally independent warriors. They were once pirates who roamed the east side of the central region. More than 100 martial artists had died at their hands. Right now, the situation in the entire central region was so rapidly changing that it was unpredictable. There were many sects that were acting in concert against independent warriors. Life for them had become very difficult, especially due to the presence of the bigger sects, who could kill them any time. Forced into a corner, the 5 of them finally decided to whitewash themselves and go ashore to join the Fish Dragon sect. The Fish Dragon sect was rather weak among the 3rd-grade sects, as it was located in a remote area, and had not been able to develop much in the past few years. Due to this change of situation in the central region, a large number of independent warriors had come to join it of late. At the same time, accepting too many independent warriors did not guarantee any good to the sect. These independent warriors did not have any loyalty to the sect as they didn't belong to it originally. If something unfavorable happened, these independent warriors would be the first ones to betray the sect. However, the independent warriors had already known some martial arts and had some cultivation basis, so they didn't need the sect to put great efforts on training them. Because of their skills, they could help the sect to acquire immaculate wealth. So, Fish Dragon sect chose to turn a blind eye to any negative consequences and accepted all the independent warriors who came to them, except for some extremely notorious ones. Precisely because of this reason, the number of disciples participating in this year's training at the sea had increased by several times. The increase of disciples had brought great benefit to the Fish Dragon sect. Facing the combined efforts of the 5 illuminating Soul Realm warriors, the black cyan clam under the sea had nowhere to hide. Even the strong defense it was so proud of had already been easily broken through. One of the warriors used his long sword to open the black cyan clam. With an overjoyed expression, he said, "Barnard, today really is a lucky day. We found a black spirit pearl in the first black cyan clam we captured." Barnard made a sound, nodding his head lightly, showing no sign of joy. As far as he was concerned, the Fish Dragon sect wasn't a good place. By taking advantage of the turbulent situation in the central region, they unceasingly recruited independent warriors. On the surface, they were recruiting disciples, but in reality, they were using independent warriors as laborers. What nonsense was this training at the sea? It was just an excuse to blackmail and exploit them. When the independent warriors had been deterred by the danger of being killed, the Fish Dragon sect was the one who provided them a place to protect themselves. Now they offered them this so-called chance of training, which was nothing but a disguised way of charging them a protection fee. They were required to hand in 10 black spirit pearls to the Fish Dragon sect every day, which was a very laborious and heavy task. But it was still better than being killed by the masters of other sects in the central region. They continued to head further into the depths of the sea after finding the first black spirit pearl. The coastal waters weren't very dangerous, yet they were very careful. After all, they were once pirates and were aware of all kinds of strange things that could happen in the chaotic ocean of stars. No one could say when a powerful, fierce beast would appear near the shore. But if that really happened, they would be doomed. Just as they were moving forward carefully, an explosive sound from the sky filled the air. It was what they called a bolt from the blue. Everyone was shocked. What is that? One of the warriors of the illuminating soul realm said in a trembling voice, his face fearful. They saw an object dive into the sea at an incredibly fast speed a few miles away. The impact was so powerful it caused waves as high as dozens of feet. Barnard's eyes widened in a flash. A rare treasure seems to have appeared, he said. Legend had it that lightning would strike and thunder would roar with other abnormal phenomenon in the sky when a rare treasure appeared in the world. It was possible that what had just happened was one of those times. They had seen something crash into the water with their own eyes. This was no folklore. Really? Are you sure, Barnard? Another warrior asked excitedly. Yes, there's a possibility that it might be the case. Let's go take a look. Barnard was a very experienced warrior. He vigilantly looked around to confirm that there were no other warriors in the surrounding sea before he flew over to the suspicious area. To be safe, he took out a water-avoiding pill and gulped it in an instant before diving deeper in the water. They were all skilled divers. With the help of the water-avoiding pill, they sank to the bottom in no time. Their faces were remarkably shocked once they reached the bottom and saw what was in front of them. They had thought they'd be met with a rare treasure, but what they found was an actual person. How could this man descend from the lightning? A martial artist said through his life vitality. Barnard stared at the man, shaking his head, trying to make sense of what he saw. Suddenly, his eyes landed on the space ring that hung from the man's chest. Immediately, a hint of greed appeared on his face. He seems to be injured. How weird is it that he chose to meditate and heal in the water? Shall we? Said Barnard, exchanging glances with the others. All their lives, they had survived by looting and killing in the surrounding seas. This wouldn't be the first time they would brazenly rob someone if they decided to do it. Even though they were now disciples of the fish dragon sect, it wasn't a big deal for them to occasionally go back to old habits and trades when no one was around. Moreover, even those large sects in the central region who prided themselves on being righteous were not completely clean and had done quite a few nasty things. It was a sad truth that the world of warriors was a cruel one. But his strength, a warrior started to speak, staring at the man meditating at the bottom of the sea. Hesitantly, he continued, Barnard, this man is a martial artist in the virtual tribulation realm. Barnard's face too displayed hesitation and reluctance. Virtual tribulation realm warriors were not people they could fight against. Even though the man in front of them was severely injured, it would be a piece of cake for him to take the lives of all these illuminating soul realm warriors in no time. Chapter 664, Evil of Human Nature. Barnard hesitated for a moment, but ultimately chose to retreat. The 5 warriors moved toward the surface of the water and quickly left the place. Although Zen's eyes were closed, he knew clearly that he had just been targeted by 5 people at the illuminating soul realm. He was truly unlucky. Back when he entered the Sea God continent for the first time, he had encountered a violent space windstorm and directly smashed onto the heavenly eagle prairie. Now, when he returned, he had once again encountered a space windstorm. Fortunately, Zen had already comprehended the second layer of the space law. Moreover, his cultivation had also improved, so he was a lot stronger than he had been before. Even though the second space windstorm was more intense than the first one, he wasn't seriously injured. However, a lot of power of space had permeated his body, and it was going to take a lot of effort to expel that power out of his body. These 5 people know their own limitations. Zen's eyes were closed as his pupils gently rolled under his eyelids. Just then, he sensed 3 people approaching and furrowed his eyebrows. Didn't they say that there were very few signs of life in the chaotic ocean of stars? Why were there so many people coming and going? The 3 warriors who were getting closer to Zen had also reached the illuminating soul realm. Once they got closer, they plunged into the water. Bess, I've found a black cyan clam. It's right at the bottom of that reef. Zen hadn't expected to meet 3 female warriors. They weren't independent warriors but inner disciples of the fish dragon sect. However, the fish dragon sect's trial at sea was not only for independent warriors. Even inner disciples had to complete the mission. After the 3 girls took water-avoiding pills, they continued to swim in the sea. Dressed in feathered clothes and swimming agilely in the sea, they looked like 3 mermaids. Yes, there is a black cyan clam hiding under the reef. First, we need to One of the girls was talking when she suddenly noticed that there was a person sitting beside the reef. Her scream didn't travel very far in the sea. Seeing the panicked expression on her face, the other 2 girls became curious. They followed her gaze and saw Zen, who was meditating at the bottom of the sea. How can there be anyone at the bottom of the sea? Is he dead? Could it be that he's cultivating there? It's so strange. Wait a minute, look, he seems to be meditating and recuperating. Is he injured? The 3 girls had great talents, but they came from a second-grade family in the East and had never received training outside. Compared with warriors who had faced life and death situations, these girls were much more naive and less cautious. Seeing Zen sitting at the bottom of the sea, the 3 of them didn't feel afraid at all. Instead, They watched him with great curiosity. One of them even slowly floated over and gently touched his body with her finger, as if to confirm whether he was dead or alive. After feeling Zen's body temperature, they discussed with each other through their life vitality and decided to take Zen to the surface. The whole time, Zen didn't move the slightest inch. He was using all his strength to expel the power of space from his body. With his control over the power of space, this process wouldn't take long. The three girls moved Zen onto a reef with all their strength. Oh, my goodness, I'm so tired. This fellow doesn't look fat. Why is he so heavy? He's even heavier than a piece of pig iron. And he's keeping his eyes closed like a statue. What's going on? The three girls were curiously sizing Zen up. Of course, Zen could hear everything that was going on and sighed inwardly. There were all sorts of people in this world. These three girls were truly too naive. As the saying went, curiosity killed the cat. If they continued to act this way all the time, they would soon get themselves into trouble. Just then, Zen felt something unusual. He sneered as he thought, it seems I underestimated those greedy fellows. He sensed that there were a few people approaching from a distance, the 5 warriors from a while ago and another 3 warriors who belonged to the later stage of the internal elixir realm. The 5 warriors had already wanted to attack Zen a while back, but they had retreated, probably afraid that they wouldn't be able to defeat him. Now, they'd gone and brought strong reinforcements with them. At one point of time, Zen had found it a little bit difficult to fight with warriors at the later stage of the internal elixir realm. But now, he could defeat them as easily as blowing off dust. He's the one in front of us. A warrior at the internal elixir realm asked with a cold expression. Barnard quickly nodded. Elder Hu, he's the one. He's seriously injured, and it seems like he won't be able to recover in a short time. A warrior at the virtual tribulation realm who was injured and unable to defend himself was a temptation for anyone. He has just reached the virtual tribulation realm. With the 3 of us working together, we'd be able to defeat him easily even if he wasn't injured. If he doesn't resist, I'll spare his life. But if he resists, another warrior at the internal elixir realm said in a shrill voice. The warrior surnamed Hu shook his head. It doesn't matter whether he resists or not. We should kill him. If he comes from some large sect and we let him go, the potential for disaster will be enormous. Agreed. Elder Hu is right, Barnard exclaimed. Soon, the 8 people arrived at their destination. At first glance, all they saw was 3 female disciples from their sect on a reef, but then they noticed the man sitting beside them. Elder Hu frowned. As he slowly approached the girls, he berated them, Bess Yuan. What are you doing here? At the sight of Elder Hu, Bess stood up and said, Elder Hu, we found a warrior here. It looks like he's injured. A sinister smile crept across Elder Hu's face. Okay, I see. You can leave. I'll take care of him. However, Bess shook her head. We're not leaving. Let's wait for him to wake up first. Do as I said. Just leave. I'll take care of him. Elder Hu said firmly. Bess didn't dare to talk back anymore. Out of their respect for Elder Hu, the 3 female disciples flew away with bitter expressions on their faces. As soon as they left, Elder Hu sneered and took out a long spear. The other 2 internal elixir realm warriors also pulled out their weapons. They weren't sure how serious Zen's injury was. They figured that since he was still meditating now, he must be more than slightly hurt. Still, the 3 warriors at the later stage of the internal elixir realm were on high alert. After all, they were dealing with a warrior at the virtual tribulation realm, so it was better to be cautious. Kill him now, no matter how serious his injuries are. At Elder Hu's command, the other 2 warriors directed their life vitality, ready to launch an attack on Zen. Zen narrowed his eyes slightly and prepared to fight back. Suddenly, he heard a cry of surprise. The 3 female disciples had returned. Elder Hu, what are you trying to do? Bess asked. Elder Hu snorted before turning to Barnard. Since they have a death wish, I'll leave them to you. When Barnard and his friends heard Elder Hu's words, their faces immediately lit up. Elder Hu, what do you mean by giving them to us? Barnard asked. Do whatever you want with them. Kill them after you finish. Elder Hu knew what was going through Barnard's mind. Great. Barnard and his friends were immediately filled with excitement. Ever since they had joined the Fish Dragon sect, they had had to follow the sect rules and refrain from sleeping with women. Moreover, these 3 girls were at the illuminating soul realm. It would be thrilling to have sex with them. The 5 men charged toward Bess and the other 2 girls. The 3 girls might be simple and naive, but they weren't idiots. They knew what would happen next if they stayed here. Let's go back. We have to tell our master. An expression of ruthlessness crossed Bess's face. The 3 girls turned around and sped away on the surface of the sea. The 5 men chased them with sinister smiles on their faces. Go back. Do you think you'll have the chance to go back? At the same time, Elder Who finally made his move. The moment he thrust his spear toward Zen, Zen's eyes shot open. He looked at the 3 warriors at the internal elixir realm with a faint smile on his face, as if he was looking at 3 dead men. Chapter 665, Fight Back. When Zen's eyes opened, the expressions of the 3 warriors at the internal elixir realm changed. Elder Who shouted, "Quick! Kill him!" All of the 3 knew that if they offended someone, it would be wise to eliminate that person. If they showed even the slightest bit of mercy, they would definitely face a lethal counterattack from the person. Therefore, there was no hesitation on their faces at all. Although Zen was about to face fierce attacks by the 3 warriors at the late stage of internal elixir realm, he didn't move at all. He gently touched the space ring hanging on his chest. A long spear and spots of light appeared before him. Lavender's tall and slender body instantly materialized and she cast a charming smile at the 3 warriors. She extended her hand to take the long spear. Her nimble wrist flicked the weapon lightly and it instantly lashed out. Clang, clang, clang. The trio owned low-grade fairy weapons, which shattered immediately upon impacting with the spear. As soon as he saw the mid-grade sacred weapon, Elder Who had a feeling this wouldn't end well. A low-grade sacred weapon was very valuable in the central region. There weren't many such weapons in the entire central region, but this woman even had a mid-grade sacred weapon. And who was this beautiful woman appearing out of nowhere? A sword spirit that had a real shape. It was hard for the 3 of them to fathom. They didn't think they could deal with her. The 3 warriors were already regretting their decision. But now that they had decided to kill Zen for his treasures, there was no use crying over spilled milk. If they were going to take his life, then they ought to be prepared to be killed in the fight too. The trio had been through many trials and hardships together, so they had a tacit understanding among each other, especially in situations where the outcomes didn't look favorable. They quickly retreated in 3 different directions. But Lavender didn't give them a chance to escape. The long spear in her hand shook lightly, and 3 invisible ripples of energy shot out. Warriors at the internal elixir realm were only equal to level 7 to level 10 war generals on the Sea God continent. Moreover, these 3 warriors were from Fish Dragon sect, a mere 3rd-grade sect. They were far inferior to Olivia and Cheryl, who were both divine-level talents. Plop, 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 blood pooled on the backs of all 3 warriors. They didn't even have a chance to fight back. They fell into the sea like kites whose strings had been cut. Their blood turned the water red. Done, Lavender said to Zen with a triumphant smile. She didn't know why, but after they had returned to the central region, she had felt joyful and relieved. As the queen of the Demon Knight, she had a proud and aloof personality. She used to order everyone around as if they were all her subordinates. But now, when she did things for Zen, she felt very happy. Zen nodded and said, "But those 3 girls are in trouble." "Who cares?" Lavender rolled her eyes. The others were completely worthless in her eyes. Zen suddenly stood up. "Come on. It took them a lot of effort to get me out of the sea." The space law power in his body had been almost removed by him. Only a small amount of it remained in his body, which had little effect on him now. He leapt off the reef and turned into a beam of light, shooting off somewhere. Bess and the other 2 girls were frightened to death. They had tried their best to flee from this place. The 3 of them had grown up under the protection of their parents and brothers. They were so innocent that they didn't know how evil some people could be. They couldn't understand why Elder Who wanted to kill that man. They had just come here for the black cyan clam. Why did Elder Who send people to kill them? Was it just to prevent them from exposing their secret? There were a lot of things that they couldn't figure out, but they didn't have the time to think right now. Even innocent girls like them knew that they would be raped and killed if they were caught. The 5 people behind them cursed and tried their best to catch up to them. Why was the sea so vast? Why couldn't they bump into someone who could save them? Arg! One of the girls suddenly screamed out. A small dart had struck her back. The dart glowed with a brilliant blue light. It was obvious that it was smeared with poison. The girl's body went limp and she fell towards the sea. However, a warrior stepped forward and caught her. "Ha ha, don't worry. You won't die just yet. This is only a sleeping drug. I won't kill you before I forget you." At the same time, another girl screamed out too. She was struck down in the same way. Seeing the terrible scene, Bess suddenly felt dizzy. She couldn't stop and turn around to save her friends. Otherwise, she would also be caught and they would all die. If she could escape, she might still have the chance to avenge her friends. I must escape, she said through gritted teeth and tears. Bess, who was usually as docile as a sheep, suddenly looked aggressive. Just then, a figure appeared in front of her. A black scorpion was tattooed on his face, and he had an evil aura. You won't be able to escape, Barnard said menacingly. Bess, why don't you play with us? I'm your sect mate, trust me, it'll be fun. A nasty smile hung on his lips. Idiot off, you don't deserve to be my sect mate. Bess gritted her teeth and pulled out her weapon. It was a flying sword, a top-grade fairy weapon. Barnard smiled and said, You're right. I am not your sect mate. If it weren't for the situation in the central region, I would have never joined this fish dragon sect. If the sect leader and elders find out about this, you will surely die. Aren't you afraid? Bess was both furious and frightened. Barnard shook his head and chuckled. They don't know. If they did, we wouldn't have attacked you. It's a pity that they will never know. From the very beginning, they had wanted to silence the girls by killing them. Now Barnard spoke without the slightest fear of being exposed. Go to perdition, she spat out. The flying sword in her hand suddenly shot out and went whirling towards the fiend. Wow, you are indeed from a large clan. Your cultivation level is not so high, yet you have a top-grade fairy weapon. I really like this flying sword. I'll happily accept it. A wicked smile appeared on his face. He was quick and easily avoided her flying sword. It was reasonable to say that Bess' cultivation level was on par with Barnard's. What was more, the cultivation method she practiced was much better than that of Barnard. Theoretically, if they were to fight, he would definitely not be a match for her. It was a pity that Bess had never gotten a crisis like this before. She rarely had the chance to fight someone with her true strength, let alone experience a life-and-death battle. Barnard and his other 4 companions were pirates, so killing and looting people came easily to them. They had a lot of combat experience, something Bess could never match up. So when they came to blows, he was a tough opponent for her. Barnard stepped aside, dodging the flying sword easily. He then moved forward and stood behind Bess. He rested his chin on her shoulder and blew a breath of air into her ear to tease her. He said softly, Your cultivation level and strength are not bad, but it's a pity that your combat experience is 0. If you continue to control the flying sword like this, you'll never be able to stab me. Bess was disgusted at his words. She struck him with her elbow. At the same time, she summoned the flying sword back to her. She thrust the flying sword backwards hoping to stab him. Once again Barnard seemed to have preempted her attack. He took a small step aside and easily dodged it. He still hung close to her back like a ghost. This time, he even put his hand on her slender waist and said, Bess, I already told you that you wouldn't be able to hurt me. Bess' combat experience was weak, but her willpower was exceptionally strong. Now she was going all out. Barnard loved to torture his prey, especially if it was this kind of a stubborn woman. He was still sticking close to her back, like a cat playing with a mouse before killing it. But this time, Bess' flying sword did not miss. It stabbed a warrior who was standing not far away from her instead. The man was laughing obscenely and tearing another girl's clothes apart. He was so engrossed in his disgusting act that he didn't see or hear the flying sword. Ray, be careful, Barnard shouted. He did not expect Bess to suddenly attack someone else either. But his warning came too late. Bess' flying sword had already pierced through the man's chest. Chapter 666, Fish Dragon Sect. Bess had never killed anybody before. But she was ruthless when it came to the warrior who was taking advantage of her friend. She made the flying sword spin when it pierced through his chest, creating a big hole. Ray, Barnard and his 4 companions had fought life-threatening battles over the years together. They had never failed due to their caution and strategic attacks. Who would have thought that one of them would be killed in the pursuit of these 3 girls? Barnard roared and tried to get a hold of Bess so that he could torture her. Bess had already stopped resisting. Her face was filled with determination. She was already prepared to die as she knew she would never be able to defeat her powerful opponent. But Barnard suddenly stopped in front of her as if he was frozen on the spot. Bess heard an indifferent voice, Use your flying sword to stab him again. Let's see if you can kill him. She was slightly stunned. She looked around, but nobody was there. It looked like someone had cast a spell on the man in front of her. He stood there in a daze, not moving at all. This was a golden opportunity for her. She did not hesitate the slightest bit. She summoned the flying sword back to her and thrust it towards Barnard's face. Although Barnard couldn't move his body, he could still speak. "You stinking jerk, how dare you?" He was scared of Bess now. Her determined expression told him she was certainly going to kill him. "Who is it? Show yourself, you mongrel," he bellowed. Zen's figure slowly appeared behind Bess. He looked at Barnard nonchalantly as if he was looking at a dead man. When Barnard saw Zen standing there unharmed, he was filled with rage and shock. Wasn't this guy severely injured? He is just a warrior at the early stage of virtual tribulation realm. Facing 3 warriors at the late stage of internal elixir realm wouldn't have been easy for him. But where are the 3 elders? Are they all dead? Barnard thought to himself. That can't be possible. Barnard's speculations ended as Bess' flying sword pierced through his head, leaving behind a trail of blood. The flying sword then fell powerlessly into the sea. Bess turned around and saw that the man in front of her was the same one she and her companions had pulled out from the sea. "Please hurry. Save my friends." Bess had been nervous the whole time. After killing 2 warriors, she was on the verge of collapsing. Now that she was safe, she allowed her exhaustion to take over. She closed her eyes and passed out. She came around after a long time. She propped herself on her elbows and saw both her friends lying beside her. Although their clothes were in disarray, their breaths were smooth. Thankfully, they were completely unharmed. Did that man save them too? She thought. She raised her head and saw the man sitting on another reef attending to his wounds. She flew over and landed lightly on the reef. She sized up the slightly skinny man in front of her. Zen looked up and saw Bess. "You're awake," he noted. Bess nodded. "Thanks a lot, sir. May I know your name?" "You are welcome, but if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have gotten involved in this in the first place." "It was your act of kindness that saved you," Zen replied. "However," Bess insisted, "my father always says that we should be grateful. That's all I know." A wistful smile appeared on Zen's face at her naive personality. Didn't her father teach her not to trust strangers? No wonder she is so simple-minded. If she remains innocent, she will eventually get hurt one day, he thought. Then he shook his head and said, "My name is Zen Luo." "Zen Luo? You are that Zen, Zen from the Cloud Hall." Bess' eyebrows shot up. She would have never thought this man would be the famous Zen. "You've heard of me?" Zen asked casually. Actually, he was not too surprised that she knew him. There were many people in the central region who knew of him. Ever since he had fought in the martial arts contest and left Midway, he was known all over the world. After that, he had helped the Cloud Hall build the strongest sect protecting array, and relied on it to provoke Eddie. This move made him even more famous. At that time, Zen was only at the Illuminating Soul Realm. It wasn't a good idea for a warrior at the Illuminating Soul Realm to provoke the strongest man in the central region, but he did so and it made him a legend among the younger generation. Countless versions of his story were being spread among people, and no matter which version they heard, everyone's heart surged with emotions. "Of course I've heard of you, but aren't you at the Illuminating Soul Realm? How did you already reach the virtual tribulation realm?" Bess looked him up and down a few times. "And the rumors in the central region say that you are already dead." Zen shook his head. He didn't care about himself, but was more worried about the situation in the Cloud Hall and his sister. "What is the current situation in the central region?" he asked. Bess wasn't really the type to keep abreast of the situation in the central region. She was more interested in hearing about Zen's legendary story. However, as an inner disciple of the Fish Dragon sect, she still knew a little bit about the situation. Right now, all the sects in the central region are united. It is believed that they want to eliminate all independent warriors, Bess said, pouting her lips. "Why?" A strange expression appeared on Zen's face. Bess explained, "They are forcing all the independent warriors to join the sects. That's why our Fish Dragon sect is filled with many warriors, good and bad. Alas, this is so frustrating." The 8 warriors that had been killed by Zen and Bess today were all once independent warriors. Elder who had joined the Fish Dragon sect a little earlier, so he managed to become an elder of the sect. "How is the Cloud Hall? What about the World Commercial Alliance? And Ethereal Spirit sect?" Zen bombarded her with questions, but Bess stared blankly at him. He understood that she clearly didn't have any clue about it. "Do your friends know?" Zen asked as he noticed that the other 2 girls were also slowly waking up. "No, they don't," Bess answered decisively on behalf of her friends. Sighing in defeat, Zen said, "Fine. The Fish Dragon sect isn't too far from here, is it?" No, it isn't. I can show you the way. Bess was glad for the opportunity to help Zen. The two girls were fully awake now. So the four of them proceeded to the fish dragon sect. After the two girls learned of Zen's identity, the three women had been chattering nonstop and almost forgot about the harrowing experience they had just been through. They talked nonstop and threw all sorts of questions to Zen, which immediately gave him a headache. Finally, Lavender couldn't take it anymore. She turned into spots of red light and emerged from Zen's body, knocking the three of them out. "You three, shut up," she yelled. The three girls immediately went silent. Lavender's sudden appearance scared them, but it only lasted for a few seconds before the three surrounded Lavender and started bombarding her with questions. "Sis, why is your skin so pale? What material is your robe made of? Why does it seem like it is woven from tree leaves? But it's very robust. Huh, sis, why are your ears so sharp?" Lavender rolled her eyes helplessly and said to Zen, "I can't help you anymore." She then turned into spots of red light again and re-entered Zen's body. Fortunately, the fish dragon sect was built on a mountain near the sea. After flying over the sea, Zen noticed a large sect. Although the fish dragon sect was only a third-grade sect, it had quite a few disciples. There were enough disciples to occupy around a third of the Purple Heart sacred place. This was also because there were too few humans on the sea god continent. Any decent sect in the central region had millions of disciples, and some large sects had tens of millions of disciples each, such as the Cloud Hall and the Ethereal Spirit sect. When they arrived at the entrance of the Fish Dragon sect, several hundred streaks of light flashed out from the sect. These streaks of light came from the constant operation of the sect protecting array. Shortly after they arrived, two beams of light shot over to them. They were two warriors at the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. One of them questioned Zen, "Who are you?" Bess smiled and replied, "Elder Yu, this is Zen Luo from the Cloud Hall." Zen Luo from the Cloud Hall. The two elders looked at each other in dismay. One of them had a confused expression. "Didn't Zen from the Cloud Hall already die? Why are you pretending to be him?" he asked warily. Chapter 667, Master Shao. That year, Zen had left without saying goodbye. Ever since Mist's celestial tomb had been opened, many top warriors of different sects had entered and obtained many golden opportunities, but many had also died. The sects in the central region had also undergone earth-shattering changes. Zen had been the first one to pass through the Wheel of Fortune in the tomb. But when the other warriors returned to their sects, they found that Zen was missing. No one knew whether he was alive or dead. The members of the Cloud Hall remained mum about Zen's whereabouts, keeping the outside world guessing. Because of this, a vast majority of warriors believed Zen to be dead. Many warriors had relied on the enchanted lamps to enter the celestial tomb. Whatever had happened in the tomb could not be kept secret, and news of those unfathomable, terrifying things had reached far and wide. This meant that even Zen's death wasn't something that was hard to accept. After all, even the elders at the virtual tribulation realm were bound to die. And Zen had only reached the illuminating soul realm at the time. "Why is there a rumor that I'm dead?" Zen said with a wry smile. He really shouldn't have left without saying goodbye. "Forget it. I want to see your leader. It doesn't matter whether you are Zen Luo or not. You're not a member of our sect, so you'd better leave," a different elder of the virtual tribulation realm said, not interested in the identity of the man before him. Right now, the situation in the central region was so unpredictable that it demanded caution at every step from every member. Bess said, "Elder Yu, Zen just saved our lives." "Bess, shut up. You three, come over here." Elder Yu berated Bess. He then turned to Zen and said coldly, "Friend, the region is in chaos. If you don't leave now, don't blame me for being impolite." Zen had come to the Fish Dragon sect for one thing, for information about the central region. But he hadn't expected the elders of the virtual tribulation realm to be so rude. His face darkened and he said coldly, "Your disciples tried to take my life while I was recuperating. I think I want to settle this debt with you. Don't cast wild aspersions on my disciples. They wouldn't do that," Elder Yu retorted. "Elder Yu," Bess started, wanting to say something. But the moment she opened her mouth, Elder Yu snapped at her yet again. "Shut up. Humph, I'm sure you came here to make trouble. Don't be so arrogant. The Fish Dragon sect is a third-grade sect. You are only a warrior at the primary level of the virtual tribulation realm. I wonder what gave you the confidence to do so." Another elder of the virtual tribulation realm sneered. There were 3 elders at the primary level of the virtual tribulation realm in the Fish Dragon sect. Its leader had reached the middle level of the virtual tribulation realm. In the eyes of these two elders, it was shocking that Zen had stepped into the virtual tribulation realm at such a young age. But whatever it was, he was only at the primary level. How could he fight against 4 warriors at the virtual tribulation realm all by himself? Friend, please leave now. As he said these words, Elder Yu began to direct the dark green life vitality within his body. He was cultivating a poisoning martial art that was difficult to deal with, even if it wasn't as powerful as the scripture of 5 poisons. Zen glanced at Elder Yu. Although there was no killing intent in Zen's eyes, Elder Yu couldn't help but tremble for some reason. Zen slowly said, "Make trouble. Fine, since you believe that I came to make trouble, I'll satisfy you." The moment he finished talking, his eyes flashed, a violent aura instantly emanating from him. The improvement in Zen's cultivation meant that his soul had become more and more stable and the power that his soul radiated had become even more terrifying. The 2 elders of the virtual tribulation realm instantly felt like a huge mountain was pressing down on them. The pressure was so powerful that it made it difficult for them to breathe, making them feel like their heads were about to explode. Most of Zen's soul pressure was directed straight ahead, but a small portion of it was spreading in all directions. Bess and 2 other female disciples who were standing beside Zen paled as they tried and failed to withstand it. They hadn't imagined that this young man, who looked so warm and gentle, would turn into someone so terrifying. Bess's face was white as paper. Although her face had turned fearful, her eyes were filled with excitement as she realized that Zen really did deserve his reputation. He was able to overpower the 2 elders of the fish dragon sect with his aura alone. He was young and possessed a strength that automatically made him attractive to any young girl. Well, friend, it looks like you really want to fight. Elder Yu looked pale, but he wouldn't allow an outsider to show off his might in his sect and succeed. He endured Zen's pressure and directed all of his life vitality to attack him. Zen raised his eyebrows, and a moment later, lavender had emerged from his body. She whipped the spear in her hand like a lightning bolt, bringing its tip to rest at Elder Yu's neck. If it moved even a little, Elder Yu's head would fall to the ground. Lavender's aura was like that of the queen of all beings. There wasn't the slightest trace of compassion in her incomparably beautiful red eyes. Elder Yu knew that if he dared to move a little bit, Lavender would surely kill him. "Welcome, Zen Luo. Sorry I didn't come out to greet you. It is my fault." A loud voice rang out. A ray of light shot out from the fish dragon sect and stopped in midair, hovering quietly. "What a rare visitor. What brings you here?" The members of the fish dragon sect had suspected Zen's identity before, but his sword spirit erased any doubts they had about him. They had heard of Zen's legend and they knew the fact that his sword spirit was a beautiful foreign female. Very few swordsmen in the central region had sword spirits, and Zen was the only one to have a stunning girl as one. Zen had originally only wanted to pay a visit to the sect's leader, Master Shao, since Bess couldn't answer his questions. He needed to know what had happened in the central region before he went back to Cloud Hall. He had not expected the 2 elders of the fish dragon sect to be so stubborn and want to drive him away. Their disciples had tried to kill him. Since they were being unreasonable, he decided to teach them a lesson. "Master Shao." There was no smile on Zen's face. "A while ago, as I was healing myself in the sea, I was ambushed by 3 internal elixir realm warriors of your sect. I came here to demand an explanation from you," he said darkly. "Is that so?" Master Shao's expression darkened as he turned to Elder Yu and asked, "How can there be such scum in our sect?" "Elder Yu, who are they?" Elder Yu shook his head. He had no idea either. Master Shao's eyes flashed angrily. As he spotted Bess, he addressed her, his voice and demeanor stern. "Bess, why didn't you report such a grave matter?" Bess was shocked but she recovered enough to reply, apology written large on her face. "It was Elder Yu who didn't allow me to mention it. I tried to report it several times." Master Shao glared at Elder Yu before smiling kindly at Bess and saying, "Tell me everything in detail." Master Shao did not know the purpose of Zen's visit. But he wasn't the head of the fish dragon sect for no reason. He was smart enough to surmise why Zen was here. There were only a few dozen internal elixir realm warriors in the sect, and a majority of them always remained at home. The independent warriors were obstinate and unruly, so it was possible for them to do such a thing. But if the fish dragon sect hadn't done what Zen claimed they had, Master Shao would not stay quiet and allow Zen to make slanderous charges against them. But if Zen's claims turned out to be true, it would be a completely different story altogether. Bess then recounted the incident when they had found Zen at the bottom of the sea, moved him onto a reef, encountered Elder Hu and were ambushed by the independent warriors. Once Bess had finished talking, Master Shao cast yet another glare at Elder Yu before addressing Zen politely. Zen, it is indeed my sect's fault. I'm so sorry. Let's discuss the reason behind it in detail in my room. Zen was actually curious as well. Although the Fish Dragon sect was only a third-grade sect, it had made a name for itself in the central region. The people he saw earlier had exuded a deep killing intent, unlike ordinary sect disciples. Zen wouldn't refuse Master Shao's invitation. Moreover, Zen hadn't planned on bringing this up, but he had to after the two elders of the virtual tribulation realm had made things difficult for him. Chapter 668, Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom. At the Sky Water Pavilion of the Fish Dragon sect. Steam was curling upwards from a cup of tea. 10 maids were dancing gracefully to a soulful tone of music. The head of the sect, whose surname was Shao, was sitting on Zen's left side with a big smile on his face. He asked, Zen, there is a rumor in the central region that you died in the celestial tomb. Now that you're here, all safe and sound, I am sure no one will ever believe that rumor again. Zen didn't care about what people were saying about him. Instead, he directly asked in return, you were saying there was a reason for the ambush. What was it? Shao sighed deeply and replied, looks like you haven't been in the central region the last couple of years. You seem to be completely unaware of the situation here. I came here for that very reason precisely, Zen replied seriously. It was true. If it weren't for his innate desire of finding out more about this region, he wouldn't have stayed in this third-grade sect. Shao nodded his head, and then continued, after those 4th and 5th grade sects visited the Mist Celestial Tomb and got back with treasures, the central region was quite peaceful for a while, though, and no problems were ever faced. That is, until about half a year later, when a new force suddenly rose from inside the central region itself. It was formed by Eddie and known as the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom. Zen's expressions immediately took a serious turn at the news about Eddie. Eddie and Cloud Hall were his priorities. The former was highly related to Yan's fate while the latter was associated with Letitia. However, despite his concerns, Zen showed no outward signs of worry and listened attentively without interrupting Shao. It's Eddie's self-proclaimed kingdom. The warriors of our central region do not acknowledge it at all. However, that does not mean it is not causing troubles. Shao sneered. When a sect reached the 6th grade, it was qualified to be termed a sacred place. In theory, a sacred place was still a sect only, just like the Purple Heart sacred place on the Sea God continent. When Zen had been there, it was a 6th grade sect, while the Heavenly Feather sacred place was a 7th grade sect. But establishing a divine kingdom was different, because the divine kingdom he created would belong entirely to Eddie alone. He could ascend to the throne of the kingdom just like an emperor. From what Zen could reckon, Eddie had established the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom in the central region only to gain more power. He was aiming to force the various 5th grade, 4th grade, and even the remaining lower grade sects into bowing down in recognition of his power. The warriors in the central region weren't going to let that happen. As soon as Eddie had established the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom, all the sects had issued a joint statement, refusing to acknowledge the existence of his so-called Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom. The point was that neither the World Commercial Alliance nor the Ethereal Spirit sect would object to Eddie forming his own sect. He could call it Heavenly Evil Sect or Earthly Evil Sect as he liked, and they couldn't care less. After all, every year, numerous new sects were formed in the central region, and some of them would become quite strong very soon. But they couldn't allow Eddie to call his force a divine kingdom. On the other hand, Eddie had already made up his mind. After naming his kingdom, he had begun to recruit people without restraint, continuously taking in independent warriors from around the entire central region. Many years ago, someone had postulated a theory that the biggest power in the central region was not the World Commercial Alliance, nor was it the Ethereal Spirit sect, rather, it was the independent warriors. These were the martial artists who hadn't joined any sect. They relied on their own strength and experience instead of resources from sects and were their own masters. Their cultivation environment was a far cry from that of a sect, and most of them weren't as capable and accomplished in martial arts as disciples from the big sects. After all, geniuses from the martial arts world were often unearthed by large sects. However, the number of such independent martial artists was enormous. With so many geniuses recruited by so many sects, there were always some talents that were left out. Therefore, such independent martial artists were a force that couldn't be ignored. Eddie was doing the clever thing of integrating all these independent warriors from the central region, and the heavenly evil divine kingdom was expanding quickly. Actually, our fish dragon sect isn't too keen on absorbing independent martial practitioners. A bitter smile appeared on Xiao's face. Some of these independent martial artists were looters originally and progressed by mere fluke of luck. They are bad for our sect's reputation. However, I had no choice but to do so due to the circumstances. Since Eddie was taking in independent martial artists, his kingdom was expanding rather rapidly, and to counter this effect, the World Commercial Alliance had no choice but to join hands with the Ethereal Spirit sect in Cloud Hall. They asked all the sects in the central region to also begin to accept independent martial artists. For many young independent martial artists, sects might have a great attraction, but for the mature martial artists, the sect's attraction was quite far from strong, because after entering a sect, they would be bound by the sect's rules, and they were used to being free, so how could they be willing to join a sect? In theory, the same problem plagued the heavenly evil divine kingdom too, but relatively speaking, the kingdom had just been established, which meant it did not have much control over its warriors. Eddie was alone and couldn't stop warriors from leaving. On the contrary, he had promised a lot of benefits to these independent martial artists, claiming that when the kingdom matured in the future, all those who joined him would reap great benefits and rewards. The sects in the central region all tried their best to recruit more independent martial artists than the heavenly evil divine kingdom. They threatened them, coerced them, and tempted them with benefits. As the situation grew, these independent warriors were left with fewer and fewer choices. They could only either join the heavenly evil divine kingdom or one of the sects. No matter which sect one joined, they had to become a sect disciple, or else there would be trouble coming their way. Why is that? When he heard Xiao's words, Zen found it a bit hard to believe. In the beginning, no one had expected things to go this far. Now, almost no one in the central region is daring enough to say that they are an independent martial artist, Xiao laughed. I think that there's bound to be a fight between Eddie and these sects pretty soon. Zen nodded. His eyes sharpened when he heard Eddie's name. There is one more thing, Zen suddenly interrupted Xiao's tale. Feel free to speak. Xiao had an extremely attentive expression. He had been angry at Elder Yu. Firstly, Zen was not someone he could afford to offend. Cloud Hall was now a 5th grade sect. The Fish Dragon sect would not be able to catch up to it even if they tried their best. Moreover, Zen's runic techniques had already become a legend within the entire central region. If Xiao's sect was on good terms with Zen, the sect officials might get him to bestow a sect protecting array on them. It didn't have to be as powerful as Cloud Hall's sect protecting array, of course. But even one that was a third as powerful would benefit the Fish Dragon sect enormously. Is Eddie's lustful demon array completed? Zen asked carefully in a hesitant tone. Actually, he was unwilling to ask this question because he was afraid of hearing the answer. However, he knew that there were some things in this world that he had no choice but to face. Xiao was aware of Zen and Eddie's history. He knew that Zen's sister, Yan, had fallen into Eddie's hands, so he understood why Zen was asking the question. Not yet. It's said that every single person in the heavenly evil divine kingdom is looking for women with the purple power body, Xiao answered immediately. When he heard Xiao's words, Zen heaved a sigh of relief. This was what had been worrying him the most in the past 2 years. It looked like luck was still on Zen's side. Seeing the happiness on Zen's face, Xiao reassured him, don't worry. The purple power body is so rare that it won't be easy to find one. Zen nodded his head. Now that he had returned to the central region, the feud between him and Eddie was going to be settled once and for all. You said that you were still healing. I can provide you with a place to stay. My Fish Dragon sect has all kinds of medicine, Xiao hastily added. Zen smiled and declined politely, that's all right. I'm only passing by here. Since I've returned to the central region now, I must hurry back to my area. Thank you for your hospitality. Now I must rush back to Cloud Hall. After a long discussion with Xiao, Zen had managed to capture 2 pieces of information. Firstly, Cloud Hall was still safe and sound, and secondly, the third purple power body hadn't been found yet. Zen was satisfied with these 2 pieces of news. Since you have important matters to attend to, I won't keep you. Xiao knew he couldn't stop Zen even if he wanted to. He stood up to send him off, and even summoned the 3 virtual Tribulation Realm Elders to escort Zen out of the Fish Dragon sect. After Zen had turned into a streak of light and disappeared into the horizon, Elder Yu asked in a sullen voice, Master Xiao, why are you being so courteous to this kid? He knew of Zen's identity, but since Zen didn't have the slightest connection with Fish Dragon sect, he couldn't understand why Xiao was so polite to him. Xiao coldly snorted as he scolded, "What do you know?" Chapter 669, The Unexpected Information. Despite the fact that Zen was only at the virtual tribulation realm as of now, Master Xiao knew the relationship between him and Letitia all too well. It was promising that Zen might eventually become the core leader of the Cloud Hall. Furthermore, Master Xiao wanted to have a chance to ask Zen for help in arranging a sect-protecting array. However, he encountered some dilemmas in doing so. First, it was difficult for him to turn to Zen for help. Second, he was not related to Zen in any way and he was also not his friend. Then again, it was fortunate that he was able to become acquaintances with him, and he therefore promised himself that he would be able to find a better opportunity to speak up next time. All of a sudden, a purplish-black stream of light rapidly flew across the sky. Within the span of mere seconds, it had already traveled several miles. Even though Zen's moving speed was extremely fast, it would still take him a couple of days to arrive at the Cloudy City. In order to reach the Cloudy City as soon as possible, he then planned to redirect his route. At the present, he was now heading towards the Ethereal City as his first stop, the big city to the east of the central region, instead of the Cloudy City itself. In reality, the Cloudy City was built with the support of the Cloud Hall, while the Ethereal City relied on the sustenance of the Ethereal Spirit sect. As for the headquarters of the World Commercial Alliance, it was located in the Oracle City. As a matter of fact, there was an even bigger sect behind every prosperous city. Moreover, there were transmission arrays set up in these large cities that were accessible. If Zen could use them to pass through the Ethereal City this time around, it would take him a significantly less time to get to the Cloudy City. After 2 days had passed by, Zen successfully arrived in the air above the ancient city. If the Oracle City was considered to be the most prosperous city in the entire central region just because of the World Commercial Alliance, then the Ethereal City would be regarded as the most ancient city in the central region. This was due to the fact that the Ethereal Spirit sect had a much longer history than that of the World Commercial Alliance. As Zen approached the Ethereal City and hovered above in the air, he could easily view the skyline of the city, which was filled with magnificent ancient buildings. Furthermore, the buildings had some historical allusions to them. In fact, there were various ancient poems and phrases that mentioned their existence. All in all, it was undeniable that the Ethereal City was indeed a famous city in history. Advancing towards his destination, Zen sensed a no-fly ban in the area. It was said before that the restriction in the Ethereal City was set by Arnold, but it was destroyed afterwards. After that, the Ethereal Spirit sect spent a huge amount of money in hiring numerous runic experts to set up the no-fly ban once more. With Zen's current strength, he could choose to ignore this no-fly ban. Nonetheless, after contemplating by himself for a while, he shrugged and decided not to cause any unnecessary trouble and promptly descended onto the main road. Without much preamble, he began to walk towards the territory of the Ethereal City. In the distance, several armored warriors could be seen standing at the entrance of the city. Those guards were also constantly observing the individuals who entered and exited the gate. Given the system of the ancient city, the ordinary mortals wandering about without even a shred of life vitality in their bodies could freely explore the premises. However, if they happened to be warriors, they would then be instantly stopped for questioning. The moment that Zen walked over with his head raised high, a hand signaled for him to stop as the armored warriors noticed his presence. Apparently, these armored warriors were mere nature creatures. With wary expressions visible across their faces, they gave Zen a careful once-over and realized that they could not figure out Zen's cultivation level. As their postures wavered because they became confused, one of them politely addressed him, "Hey. There is a rule in the Ethereal City that we have to check on which sect or clan each warrior belongs to. Independent warriors are not allowed to enter the city." The young warrior hesitated before continuing, "May I ask which sect or clan you are from?" As of the moment, all of the large sects were trying their best to limit the living space of the independent warriors. Even the Ethereal City had prohibited the independent warriors from entering the city and made sure that they did not go too far. This was basing from the terrible experience that there were some places where the city members had a big conflict with the independent warriors and even killed hundreds of independent warriors. That is to say that an independent warrior is not even allowed to enter the city, right? Zen raised an eyebrow, slightly affronted by the news. He felt annoyed and was in disbelief by the reality he had to face. In this case, the independent warriors had no other choice then aside from joining those sects. Well, that's how it is here, the armored warrior stated with a grin. Appraising him over once more, he then continued, you also know the current situation in the central region, right? If you happen to be an independent warrior, I can help you find someone to invite you to join the ethereal spirit sect. With your powerful strength, you can surely join it. Just then, the armored warrior observed that Zen briefly hesitated and seemed to ponder over something, so he immediately assumed that Zen was truly an independent warrior. With an immediate shake of his head, Zen faintly grinned before dissenting, thank you for your good intentions. However, I am a member of the Cloud Hall. The Cloud Hall. The armored warrior's eyes flashed with unbridled surprise at what Zen had just uttered. Can you prove that you are one of its members? He inquired. Zen looked down and lightly tapped the ring hanging on his chest, taking out a token from inside the ring and bringing it up for every one of them to see. The disciple card that Zen acquired after joining the Cloud Hall seemingly gleamed in the sunlight. Humming to himself, the armored warrior pretended to look over the token several times. Truthfully, he was not from the Cloud Hall, so how could he ever determine if the disciple card the young man had showed them was actually real or fake? However, even if he was putting on an act as he scratched his chin in fake contemplation, he still had to try his best to check it. In fact, there were several stubborn independent warriors who were unwilling to join a sect and continued to live on their own terms. Despite of this, these same individuals also had to enter these large cities to deal with their things. Because of this, they had no choice but to entrust others to make counterfeit copies of the disciple cards of those sects. After examining the token for a while, the armored warrior passed the disciple card back to Zen with an affirmative nod. As the group of armored warriors made way for Zen to pass through, Zen nodded as well before finally entering the ethereal city. In this ancient city, the streets that adorned the town, as well as their assorted delicacies, were all distinctive. Upon feasting his eyes on the unique structures and famous treats, Zen did not rush to the transmission array. Instead, he strode towards the famous moon pavilion in the ethereal city as he planned to rest for a short while before continuing with his journey. The moon pavilion was not spectacularly large or tall like other establishments due to it being only 3 stories high. However, it was directly adjacent to the limpid river, and the scenery one could see if he happened to take a glimpse at it was extremely beautiful and elicited feelings of tranquility. Since ancient times, many people had turned up in this pavilion to recite poems. Thus, the Moon Pavilion had a first-class reputation as people spent a lot of money and time enjoying themselves there. Once Zen had randomly ordered a few simple yet elegant dishes, Zen looked into the distance, leaning his head on his hand absent-mindedly. Inside the pavilion, there were a handful of scholars shaking their heads and chanting an old song at the tables beside where he sat. When they were in high spirits, they picked up the chopsticks located on the table to beat the bowl from time to time. The men who beat the bowl seemed to be adept at beating it rhythmically, so the beating sound they made sounded pleasant. Amused at the performance, Zen also found it interesting when he heard this and even clapped after they performed. Grateful for the attention, those people flashed Zen a quick smile. As a matter of fact, most of the scholars situated in the Moon Pavilion were not warriors. At this time, Zen also sighed deeply, a little wistful at the thought that such a kind of ordinary life was also great and enjoyable in itself. Despite this, Zen ultimately understood that the path he had chosen for himself, a warrior, was something intrinsically valuable and there was no reason for him to retreat. From the first day he had started to pursue and cultivate the martial arts, he was destined to struggle against the heaven, the earth, and everything in between. Even though he thought it was possible for him not to reach the land of promise even if he kept on cultivating himself, he understood that he was definitely falling into the everlasting perdition if he retreated now. While the scholars busied themselves with playing and singing at the same time, several warriors walked in the pavilion. Apparently, these particular set of warriors were all at the illuminating soul realm, and they immediately shouted out loud the moment they came in, as if they owned the place. As they exuded such haughtiness by being disruptive, the scholars who were in the Moon Pavilion stared at them angrily. On the other side, those warriors did not seem to be aware of this fact, or did not care at all. Striding inside with their heads held up high, they just despised and ignored the mortals. Unimpressed by the sight of the boisterous group, Zen turned around and continued to mind his own business, eating his food and drinking. However, his ears managed to pick up the flow of their conversation and it slightly intrigued him. "Alas, I'm so tired," one of them pronounced, stretching his arms languidly before placing them behind his head. "The ethereal spirit sect members do not treat us as disciples at all. They just treat us as slaves. The warrior huffed and gulped down his wine, venting to the others about the unfair treatment and the unhappiness buried deep in his heart. Shish, do not speak so loud. If the inner disciples of the ethereal spirit sect happened to hear your words and told the sect leaders about this, you would definitely be in trouble by then. Another warrior reminded him in a low voice while looking at his companion with a strict expression. Upon hearing their exchange, the realization finally dawned on Zen. These warriors were independent warriors before. Due to having no other options, they had to join the ethereal spirit sect despite having initial doubts. It was obvious right then and there that they were not satisfied with their current situation. Alas, I hope this matter can end soon. Otherwise, if we continue to wander around the city in a state of extreme nervousness and fear, it's going to be really tiresome. One of them exclaimed, frowning at the thought of the reality they were facing. Shaking his head forlornly, another warrior replied, I think that if the young lady of the Shi clan were able to find a man to sleep with, everything could be resolved. Zen heard a pregnant pause before the man's next words made him suddenly still. And Eddie would not care about or think about her anymore. The minute he overheard those words, Zen was instantly surprised and his ears perked up. What does he mean by that? He thought to himself. The young lady of the Shi clan. Zen muttered, as something started to form in his mind. Furrowing his eyebrows, he clasped his hands in front of him, foregoing the food in front of him to gather his thoughts instead. What he had just heard was certainly strange, for Eddie was considered to be the strongest and most powerful person in the central region. Therefore, he could surely surround himself with all the women his heart desired. If Eddie himself, despite his reputation, kept on thinking about that woman, she must have been special, perhaps, she had something to do with the purple power body. While Zen was in the middle of deliberating with himself, his figure suddenly flashed. As he was just sitting still a moment ago, he suddenly appeared next to the group of the discussing warriors in the blink of an eye while maintaining his sitting position. Moreover, what was more baffling was the fact that the stool he was sitting on also moved over with him, but from the beginning until the end, he did not make a single sound. It was as if he had acted like a ghost. When the group of scholars witnessed the scene unfold before their very eyes, they assumed straightaway that they had seen something wrong. Blinking in disbelief, they rubbed their eyes and looked once more, only to discover that Zen managed to stealthily move his stool more than 10 feet away from his original place. With their expressions visibly brightening and their eyes lighting up with undiluted surprise, they all instantaneously believed that they had just encountered a master. As for the group of warriors who were drinking the wine and enjoying themselves in their table, they were also reasonably startled by the sudden appearance of Zen. With a hard look, one of them glared at Zen and asked, "Hey, what was that for?" Clank. Without breaking eye contact, Zen passively dropped a Supreme Life Vitality crystal onto the table. With a serious tone, Zen immediately said, "I'll pay for the wine and food." The moment the warriors laid their eyes upon the glistening Supreme Life Vitality crystal, they found themselves gasping and unable to look away from it. Everyone was well aware of the fact that the prices of the food in the Moon Pavilion were awfully expensive, and an average person could definitely not be able to afford it. Nevertheless, it was possible for a warrior to dine there, as 1 or 2 low-grade life vitality crystals would be sufficient enough to pay for consuming food in the pavilion for half a month. Astonishingly, this Supreme Life Vitality crystal that Zen casually threw out was more or less equal to about 1 million low-grade Life Vitality crystals. In other words, with this exceptional Supreme Life Vitality crystal, Zen could book the entire Moon Pavilion and have extravagant meals there every day for several years. Chapter 670, Miss Shi. The warriors were incredibly dumbstruck at the sight of the Supreme Life Vitality crystal in front of them. Even if they were warriors in the illuminating soul realm, a Supreme Life Vitality crystal was still a massive fortune for them. Not everyone was as good as Zen when it came to making money. He was very capable, and this was evident back in the eastern region when he used heavenly essence to easily earn cubic crystals. After his arrival in the central region, Zen delved into learning the technique of drawing divine textures. Now, given his high level of skill, any sect would be willing to pay whatever rate he provided just for him to set up a sect protecting array for them. A third-grade sect like Fish Dragon sect did not even have the right to ask him for such a favor. One of the warriors swallowed thickly, "But it's too much," he stammered. "After paying the bill, the rest will be yours," Zen told them. Their eyes sparkled with excitement. Really?" Zen nodded in confirmation. The amount he offered them would surely be enough. However, to his surprise, the warriors shook their heads. It was too good to be true from their perspective. To offer them something so precious like the Supreme Life Vitality Crystal for so little either meant Zen was baiting them or he was an idiot. Zen was certainly not an idiot. Zen sighed at their hesitation. I don't have any requests. I just want to hear about Miss Zai's story, he said. Tell me, and the Supreme Life Vitality Crystal is yours. One of the warriors blinked doubtfully. Is that really all? He asked. Zen nodded. Yes. A strange expression appeared on the warriors' faces. One of them leaned forward. You just arrived in Ethereal City, right? He asked Zen. Yes, I just arrived. No wonder you wanted to know. The warrior remarked. It's not really a secret, almost everyone in Ethereal City is talking about it right now. Zen frowned. Don't tell me, he said faintly. Does this Miss She actually have the extremely rare purple power body? The warrior's eyes widened. Oh, you knew about it already. Zen's gaze flickered. I just guessed. This new piece of information he had obtained certainly made the situation extremely troublesome. His biggest weakness was his sister, Yan. Except for that, nothing else would make him a bundle of nerves. Back when he was only at the Illuminating Soul Realm, he had managed to kill Marilyn and delay Eddie's plans, thus, keeping his sister relatively safe for the time being. Who would have thought another purple power body would appear here in Ethereal City? Miss She does possess the purple power body, the warrior confirmed. She has been targeted by Eddie and everyone in the Ethereal City has been panicking. We figure that it's only a matter of time before he leads his heavenly evil sect to attack us. Despite Eddie declaring his sect as the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom, nobody really recognized it, so they just referred to it as the Heavenly Evil Sect. Since that's the case, why doesn't she just find someone to marry? Zen asked. If she gets married, wouldn't that solve everything? Despite the competition between the Ethereal Spirit Sect and Cloud Hall, both of them shared the same sentiments when it came to Eddie. If Eddie successfully managed to set up the lustful demon array, he would be able to improve his cultivation level and step into the Soul Sea realm. Once that happened, he would be virtually unstoppable. No one in Central Region, not even the great sects like the Ethereal Spirit Sect, World Commercial Alliance, Cloud Hall, Mysterious Luna Hall, nor the Bloodwood Cliff would be able to resist him. For all the sects, big or small, it was either they swore their allegiance to Eddie or be wiped out forever. The appearance of another purple power body threatened the entire existence of everyone in the Central Region. The Ethereal Spirit Sect didn't want Eddie to find the third purple power body either. The warrior laughed bitterly at Zen's words. That's exactly what we are complaining about. Do you know the identity of Miss She? Zen shook his head. What kind of special identity does she have? Even though the She clan was a third-grade sect, it would still be impossible for them to disobey Eddie's wishes. Our Ethereal Spirit Sect leader's name is Xander and his surname is She, the warrior told Zen. He has since become a Taoist while still wearing his hair. However, despite being a Taoist, he has his own family with a wife and kids in the She clan. Miss She is actually his great-granddaughter. Zen nodded at the warrior's explanation. I see, but this is still a very serious and important matter. It's his duty to marry her off for the sake of the greater good. Everyone shares the same opinion as you, the warrior agreed with a helpless expression on his face. But the young lady is the apple of her family's eyes and is greatly favored by Xander. Although they have introduced several excellent talents from the Ethereal Spirit Sect to her, she refused every single one of them. Zen's eyebrows furrowed. This was indeed troublesome. As long as Eddie was alive, the problem would always exist. A purple power body had already appeared in Ethereal City, so who was to say that there wouldn't be another one in Cloudy City? Purple power bodies were indeed rare, but there were too many people residing in the Central Region and one of them was bound to possibly possess it. The probability of Eddie finding one was not small at all. In the end, Zen still had to kill Eddie to save Yan. But, for the time being, he had no choice but to intervene in this matter with Miss She. If Eddie did truly come to take her away, it wouldn't just be a problem for her, but also a nightmare for Zen. He mulled over just how he should solve this. Zen could kill Marilyn because she was Eddie's woman, but Miss She was Xander's great-granddaughter. He couldn't just go up to their residence and stab her to death with his sword. While Zen was lost in his thoughts, one of the warriors spoke. In my opinion, we should just find a man to sleep with her and take away her virginity energy. That's the best solution. It's truly a pity that the She clan is a noble clan with a sect leader. They are too conventional. Find a man to sleep with her. The warrior's words were crude but reasonable. As long as Miss Zai's virginity energy was taken away, Eddie would give up on her. The question was who would sleep with her. A spy from the Heavenly Evil sect was caught 2 days ago. It seems Eddie's already preparing to take action. I think it won't be long before he comes to our city to take her away. Another warrior remarked. His words made Zen more anxious. This matter had just become an urgent issue that needed to be solved. Making up his mind, Zen silently stood up and walked out of the Moon Pavilion. Hey, your Supreme Life Vitality Crystal. None of the warriors dared to take the Supreme Life Vitality Crystal he left behind. Take it, Zen told them. It's your reward. Loud fighting noises immediately came from the Moon Pavilion as soon as he was out the door. It seemed the warriors were now fighting over the Supreme Life Vitality Crystal he had given them. Zen ignored them and continued his way. At that moment, his sword spirit condensed next to him and Lavender appeared. She floated lightly beside him and attracted the attention of passers-by. Lavender kept pace with Zen. She faced Zen with a gentle smile on her face. What are you worrying about? The solution is so simple, she told Zen with a gentle voice. Just sleep with her, she remarked with a smile. In the Demon Knight race, the females far outweighed the population of males. Being the queen, Lavender did not avoid talking about such things with him, and Zen had come to realize that the customs between races were very much varied. Zen was greatly troubled. We should at least find a man. Lavender suddenly pointed a slender finger at him. Me. Zen quickly shook his head. No, I can't. Lavender blinked her eyes and pouted. Then what do you want to do? She blinked her eyes and asked. Let's wait and see first, he said. It was a rather complicated situation given Miss Zai's status. He wondered what Xander was going to do to solve this. Would he just continue to let his great-granddaughter act like this until Eddie finally came to take her away? He didn't know that Xander was, in fact, also very troubled. News about his great-granddaughter possessing a purple power body had spread, and there was no way to stop it. In the past, such news would be received very happily by the clan. However, these were sensitive times with the threat of Eddie hanging over their heads. He just happened to be short of a purple power body for him to successfully set up the lustful demon array. Both leaders of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance shared his concern and had already successively urged Xander to marry off his precious great-granddaughter. Xander was trying his best. He had even suggested for the clan's master to use domestic discipline to punish her into relenting. However, it was hopeless. No amount of coaxing or threatening could get his great-granddaughter to yield. Her strong personality made her extremely obstinate, and she claimed that she would rather die than marry someone she did not like. It was probably because of reading all those romantic novels. It made her obsessed with the idea of true love. Xander was an old man. He couldn't possibly understand what went on in his teenage great-granddaughter's head. In any case, she had to be married off right away. Otherwise, they would all be doomed. Chapter 671, Margaret Shi. The Shi clan was a large, noble clan in the ethereal city. In the olden times, however, the city only considered it as a second-grade clan. At that time, the whole city didn't view the Shi clan as a big family. After all, the ethereal city had thousands of years of history, and there were many third-grade clans. But ever since a member of the Shi clan became the leader of the ethereal spirit sect, the Shi clan's status had exponentially risen, and it became a part of the third-grade clans in Ethereal City. The Shi clan had almost 10,000 members, and they all lived in the Shi clan's castle, which lay in the east of the Ethereal City. At dusk, the lanterns at the gate of the Shi clan's castle would illuminate everything around it. Since the lanterns relied on the life vitality to emit light, the low-grade life vitality crystals were put in them, and they had been able to light up the lanterns for years now. A low-grade life vitality crystal was not cheap and readily available for everybody, and so an ordinary family would not be able to afford it. The light from the lanterns of the Shi clan were outlining the walls of the entire castle. The sight was magnificent, and the common folk couldn't help but admire the scenery of the night. They were amazed by the extreme wealth of the Shi clan. At night, groups of people would stroll around the square in front of the Shi clan's house or lean onto the railing of the bridge. Some people chatted casually and some admired the lanterns. It was the brightest place in the entire ethereal city. It was also because of this that many vendors had come to the area to set up stalls to sell all kinds of stuff, such as needlework and all kinds of small, strange accessories. There were also people who sold food, such as roasted sweet potatoes and meat kebabs, and their lovely scent filled the air. Are the Shi clan's lanterns really lit with life vitality crystals? They have so many lanterns, so it must mean that several hundred life vitality crystals are needed to light everything up. A visitor couldn't help but let out an odd gasp as he saw the She clan's many lanterns. Perhaps it was his first time to visit the ethereal city and see the She clan's castle. Don't be so surprised. The lanterns of the She clan have been lit up for decades. I believe that countless life vitality crystals have been consumed just to do that, another visitor explained as he shook his head. This clan is indeed too rich. From what I've heard, even 1,000 ounces of gold wouldn't be enough to be exchanged for a life vitality crystal. I'm afraid that the She clan is just wasting their gold. What are you on about? The She clan is a distinguished third-grade clan, their wealth is literally unimaginable. Gold and silver are like dung in the eyes of the warriors of the clan. Literally not worth anything, another visitor said, rolling his eyes. Well, I really couldn't imagine that. I don't know what kind of life those warriors have, but if I could have another go at life, I would not choose to become a scholar when I was young. I just realized now a scholar is just a nobody in this society. Instead, I would choose to become a warrior, the tourist complained. Oh goodness, that obviously is not the case. The world of warriors is bloody, and the She clan must have traded many warriors' lives for the survival of such a large clan. The visitor chuckled, turning to the guy next to him, he said, rumor has it that the young lady from the She clan is looking for a suitable man to get married to. You know what, I think you are truly talented, impressive and charming. I think you might have a chance. It was well known that all throughout that month, the She clan members had been busy trying to find a perfect man for their young lady to marry. The purple power body that the young woman had might prompt many things to get involved, and it might also bring the clan members unprecedented trouble if she still didn't get married. But as the largest clan in Ethereal City, the She clan would not really let their young maiden to marry in a hurry. When the news broke out that the clan was looking for the right man for her, it attracted a lot of young, handsome men from all over the region. After all, who wouldn't want to marry her? She was beautiful, and a part of the big She clan, which was supported by the leader of the ethereal spirit sect. The one who would be lucky to marry the young lady would be very famous and powerful beyond his expectations. Me, the guy said, confused. Ha ha, I'm afraid that I'm not good enough to even be a remote match for her, the man, who had the surname of Han, responded as he slowly shook his head. Well, you seem to have a clear estimation of yourself. There are no less than 1,000 young men who have gone to the She clan's castle. Some of them are even heaven-level talents. And those men are only in their 20s and 30s, but they have a very high cultivation base already. But you know what? Every one of them was rejected. The young lady has a very particular taste about men, and not one of them has passed it. A young dame of such an influential, noble clan had a higher status than that of a princess in the mortal world, so when the She clan started looking for a husband for her, it was considered as a major matter in the ethereal city. It was on everyone's mouth. In a quiet small courtyard of the She clan's castle, a 16-year-old lady was sitting upright under 2 jasper screens. She was cultivating herself. The young lady was dressed in white clothes with 2 light green ribbons hanging from her shoulders. Her fair and beautiful face was stunning. At that moment, a series of knocks came from the door of the small courtyard. Upon hearing this, the young lady frowned and rolled her eyes. At first, she was unwilling to get up and open the door, but the person kept on knocking, as if he himself was unwilling to stop unless she opened the door. And with that, she took a deep breath, and said, "Come in." The gate to the courtyard was pushed open, and 3 people entered. The one in the lead was a young man whose eyes were very bright. He had a faint smile on his face. Quickly, he moved towards the young girl, passing through the screen. When he came upon her, he said sweetly, "Margaret." His eyes were twinkling. The young lady opened her eyes, looking morose. She stared angrily at the young man and said, "Brent, can you walk normally?" This young man, whose full name was Brent She, was a divine-level talent from the ethereal spirit sect. He became a member of the She clan by virtue of adoption. Since he grew up in the She clan's castle, he had a very close relationship with everyone in the clan, but especially with the young lady in front of him. Brent smiled as he put a bunch of scrolls in front of the young lady. Giggling like a child, he said, "I've received so many scrolls today." When the young lady saw the scrolls, she became even angrier. The life vitality in her hand fluctuated, and then a blazing flame shot out. Soon enough, all the scrolls in front of her were in danger of catching fire. When Brent noticed what Margaret was trying to do, he pointed at the space in front of him and it suddenly distorted. Although Margaret was shooting the fire directly towards the scrolls, not a bit of it touched its target. "This is the mission that Uncle gave me. You should at least let me finish what I'm going to say, Brent said, with an annoyed expression now. With that, Margaret coldly snorted and closed her eyes once again. With a deep breath, she whispered, "Okay, then. Continue with your nonsense." Brent acted like he was doing his usual routine. He picked up a scroll and slowly unfurled it in front of Margaret She. There was a handsome man drawn into it, and a poem was written beside the man. The person in this painting is Aaron of the Ethereal City. His cultivation base is at the middle stage of internal elixir realm. Wow, he has already become a leader even at such a young age. Brent announced with a smile. Next, Margaret said expressionlessly, her eyes still closed. The person in the next scroll painting is Saint Omar, the elder of the Illusion God sect. He is 31 years old. Literally next, this scroll painting. The process continued, and after a few minutes, Brent was able to introduce all the men drawn in the scrolls one by one. After he finished, he just smiled resignedly and said, "Are you interested in any of these men?" "No," replied Margaret flatly. It didn't seem like she had given it any thought. In fact, this sort of boring conversation had been repeated 100 times during this month. Brent She introduced different men to Margaret She 3 times every day, and he had already read thousands and thousands of names of notable men. But Margaret She still hadn't picked anyone to get married to. Brent didn't mind Margaret's disinterest and instead laughed heartily. "If you are not interested in any of them, then we have to wait until tomorrow. I truly wonder when you'd get married." Upon hearing these words, Margaret's eyes flew open, her face red with rage. She then scolded at the gentleman in front of her, though with a smile. "You are really so annoying. Don't tease me like that every day." Indeed, everyone wanted to marry Margaret She, the lady of the She clan, the person who had the purple power body. The whole She clan was truly starting to get anxious. Eddie's ambition was known to everyone all over the central region, and the members of all the sects were paralyzed with fear of the incoming danger. The ethereal spirit sect's prosperity was closely related to the She clan, and if the ethereal spirit sect fell, the She clan would also be in trouble. The most important thing for Eddie right now was to make the lustful demon array. Eddie had been waiting for decades to form this array, but in the end, he had no choice but to delay setting it up as Marilyn had been killed. But the She clan had a lady with the purple power body, Margaret. How could they not be nervous and upset? A while ago, they found out that a spy from the Heavenly Evil sect had sneaked into the city. They said that the Heavenly Evil sect members had set their eyes on Margaret She, which caused the entire ethereal city to be in an uproar. Rumor had it that the Heavenly Evil sect was planning to attack the ethereal city just to get to Margaret She. The few big clans of the ethereal city immediately went over to the She clan's house in hopes that the She clan had already found a man for Margaret She to get married to as soon as possible. Amidst the high-tension nature of their predicament, everyone still talked to the members of the She clan about this matter in a friendly way because of Xander. Without him, they would have immediately taken Margaret She away. To put it bluntly, there were only 2 ways for Margaret She to choose to resolve the problem: she either could marry someone as soon as possible or she had to be killed. Under no circumstance could she be caught by Eddie. With those as their only choices, the whole She clan started to feel pressured. Chapter 672, A Visit. After Brent had finished laughing to his heart's content, his face turned serious once more as he spoke. "Today, in the ethereal spirit sect, my master told me that he is not going to just let you continue to act however you please." The master Brent was speaking of was the leader of the ethereal spirit sect, Xander. If it wasn't for Xander, how could anyone tolerate Margaret's extremely obstinate behavior? Even though Xander always tolerated his wishful great-granddaughter and let her get away with everything, the people of the ethereal spirit sect in the ethereal city criticized him severely for that. The situation was becoming very grave and it was time he prioritized the overall situation over her. All he had to do was sacrifice a girl of the She clan. And in any case, the girl had to get married, and there were so many young talented men for her to choose from. Did great-grandpa really say that? Upon hearing Brent's words, a trace of sadness appeared across her face. Brent was a year younger than Margaret, but since he was still training in the ethereal spirit sect, his thoughts were more mature than that of the latter. To comfort her, he told her, "Margaret, the master is under a lot of pressure too these days. Judging by the current situation, I'm fairly certain that Eddie is planning to make a move any time now." "How dare he? Hang on, look. Our ethereal spirit sect is the #1 sect in the entire central region. If Eddie is really planning to make a move, he isn't going to attack this place first. Margaret was initially about to rise up in anger, but her thought seemed to calm her down. Brent smiled helplessly and asked, "Why do you think that he won't attack the ethereal spirit sect?" The top 3 powers in the central region are the ethereal spirit sect, the World Commercial Alliance, and the Cloud Hall. If the heavenly evil sect wants to take action, they will definitely aim at any one of these 3 great powers. Now, let's weigh the possibility of Eddie attacking us, shall we? The World Commercial Alliance has an ancient tycoon to protect the place, and the Oracle City is a place that won't be easily taken down, and help will arrive before something can happen. As for the Cloud Hall, that cloudy city is nothing to be reckoned with, but there is an extremely formidable sect protecting Array in the Cloud Hall, and it would be hard for the heavenly evil sect to take the city with that still in place. Although our ethereal spirit sect is known as the strongest sect in the central region, but compared to the other 2 sects, we are the easiest target, and most probably he would take us on first. Brent's analysis was indeed very reasonable. The force of the World Commercial Alliance would be highly intimidating for Eddie even today. As for the Cloud Hall, he had already suffered greatly from its sect protecting Array when he had tried to seek revenge for his son once. Relatively speaking, if he wanted to start a war among the sects, the safest option would be finding a way to break through into the ethereal spirit sect first. Moreover, the ethereal spirit sect had the reputation of being the strongest of all sects in the central region. If Eddie could take down the ethereal spirit sect, a large number of independent warriors would surely join the heavenly evil sect. If Eddie comes and attacks the ethereal city, you might not be the biggest cause of the war, but you will definitely be one of the reasons for the attack. Brent continued in a serious tone, "If you marry someone, then Eddie will give up his hope of taking you away and making you his 3rd purple power body. At least when the heavenly evil sect attacks us, no one will blame you." Margaret looked gentle and calm in her demeanor, as beautiful and graceful as an orchid in a deep valley. On the surface, she seemed to be so meek and mild, giving others the impression that she was an obedient girl. But deep inside, she was stubborn and obstinate, always sticking to her own ideas. After hearing Brent preach with that serious expression on his face, she became a little annoyed and suddenly blurted out, "So what if they blame it on me? The worst would be that I just die. I don't care if that happens." Hearing this, Brent knew that it was impossible to get it through to her, so he finally gave up. "Margaret, I'm afraid that when the worst scenario really happens, you won't be able to find death even if you wish to." This sentence seemed to shake Margaret a bit. Her heart jolted when she thought of the possibilities of her fate. Her body trembled a bit as panic began to seize her, and she suddenly felt at a loss and didn't know how to respond. Eddie was known as both righteous and evil. It was easy for her to imagine what would become of her if she fell into his hands. However, the panic only flashed in her eyes for a moment, and soon enough, a vicious grin appeared on her face. She clenched her teeth and made a decision. "If that's the case, I will prepare a poison. If Eddie really comes, I will take the poison and commit suicide." In the end, Brent sighed and left the place with the other 2 servants. The next day, in the earliest possible hour of the morning, a young man dressed in a green robe appeared on the square in front of the castle of She Clan. It had been very late when he had arrived at the ethereal city yesterday. So he had stayed for a good night's rest before going to the castle of She Clan. When dawn finally began to show in the morning, he immediately traveled halfway across the ethereal city towards the castle. Just as he arrived at the square in front of the gate of the castle, he saw numerous people line up there. The line was so long that it looked like a long dragon that extended hundreds of feet from head to tail. There were over 100 people in the square. There were all kinds of people in the crowd. There were strong and sturdy men, and scholarly men who were dressed up elegantly and with refined manners. As for their cultivation levels, they varied greatly. There were common people without any cultivation base at all, and also powerful warriors from the internal elixir realm. Have they all come here to vie for the chance to marry Miss She? At the realization of this, Zen, who was standing beside the line, smiled in mild amusement. It seemed that She Clan had become really anxious. But he had heard that this contest had been going on for a long time now. He didn't know why Miss She was being so picky. Was her heart lofty than the sky itself? There were so many suitors, so why had she not found one to her liking? Zen wondered. "Hey, you newcomer, for the marriage contest, line up at the back." A servant of the She Clan, upon seeing Zen standing away from the line, pointed at him and harshly scolded him. This servant probably thought that Zen was going to cut in the line. Zen was not angry at all. This servant was just an ordinary person and naturally could not tell Zen's cultivation level. As for the other martial artists in the line, their expressions changed when they noticed that Zen's cultivation level was at the virtual tribulation realm. The man has stepped into the virtual tribulation realm at such a young age. Which sect is he from? They wondered. On the Sea God continent, it was not uncommon for a warrior of Zen's age to become a warlord. For example, if Cheryl, Olivia and several other cultivators wanted to break through, they could achieve the same through hard training in the Tower of Sin. The speed of improving one's cultivation in the Tower of Sin was far greater than what the outside world could measure up to. However, in the central region, reaching the illuminating soul realm at this age was indeed surprising. Unless the big sects put in a lot of their resources to cultivate some talented disciples, people might never achieve this feat. Upon being aware of the cultivation level of Zen, none of the warriors in the line dared look down upon Zen. "I am not here to propose marriage," Zen replied faintly. "We are extremely busy now. If you didn't come here to propose marriage, then don't stay here and make trouble. Go away and find some other place to have fun." The servant started to drive him away without any hesitation. As a servant of the Shi clan, even an ordinary martial artist wouldn't dare to provoke him, so he wasn't afraid of Zen. Zen was still as indifferent as he was before. He said, "I have come here to pay a visit to the master of the Shi clan." The servant laughed coldly. "Pay a visit to the master of the Shi clan? Just you?" Even when those martial artists who had special identities wanted to meet the master of the clan personally, they had to pull a lot of strings to get an appointment. This servant obviously misunderstood Zen. He shrugged and told him, "Our master doesn't have the time to entertain guests right now. If you don't leave now, I'll call for more people to force you away." Just at this time, an elder steward walked over and shouted at the servant, "You idiot! How can you speak like that? Go away." The steward of the Shi clan was a nature creature. He saw a dispute arise from far away and came over to take a look. When he saw what was going on, he was startled. The servant was scolding a cultivator who was at the virtual tribulation realm. In the central region, a warrior at the virtual tribulation realm was a great force to be reckoned with. The master of the Shi clan was merely at the middle stage of virtual tribulation realm. However, this young man, who was a virtual tribulation realm warrior, looked so young even from far away. Therefore, the steward assumed that he must be someone with an extraordinary background. He immediately rushed over and drove away the rude servant. Then he bowed to Zen and apologized, "Sir, the servant is an idiot. Please don't take his words to heart. How can we help you?" Zen's face was still completely expressionless. Of course he wasn't going to hold a grudge against an ordinary servant with no cultivation background. He only replied faintly, "No blame attaches to the unconscious doer of wrong. But I still want to pay a visit to your master. The master has been very busy recently, but if you really want to meet him, I feel obliged to pass on your message." "Please tell me your name first," the steward replied with a smile. He had been working in the Shi clan for dozens of years, so he knew that he should not be disrespectful to the person in front of him. Zen nodded and said to the steward, "Tell him that Zen Luo has come to visit him." Zen Luo," the steward suddenly called out loud as his eyes stared at the man in front of him as if he'd seen a ghost. Since the sound of his exclamation was way too loud, it immediately alarmed the numerous warriors who'd lined up to propose marriage. Many of the warriors also walked over with puzzled faces. "Did you hear that? That brat said he was Zen Luo. Is that the same Zen Luo from the Cloud Hall? Isn't he supposed to be dead? For the past 2 years, there has been no news of him at all. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air all of a sudden. Honestly speaking, I think it's quite possible that he is really Zen Luo. Other than him, who else can step into the virtual tribulation realm in just 2 years? Oh, right, there is also one, Brent, ethereal spirit sect's divine level talent." The steward of the Shi clan looked at Zen in a daze, and then he asked cautiously, Are you really Zen Luo?" Zen smiled faintly. "Yes, I am. All right, I'll pass on your message. Please wait a moment." With that, the steward dashed into the castle as fast as he could, as if he was flying. Although this steward suspected Zen's identity, it was not up to him to judge whether his claim was true or not. The master of the Shi clan would come to a conclusion on his own. Chapter 673, 2 Options. Not long after, several streaks of light shot out from within the Shi clan's castle, immediately attracting the attention of many warriors who were there to woo Margaret. One of the streaks of light zoomed directly into the square. A boy shouted, "Zen!" The boy was none other than Brent. 2 years ago, he had missed the opportunity to challenge Zen due to a sudden change during the martial arts contest. He had always regretted it. In the past 2 years, Brent's cultivation level had increased a lot, but Zen had disappeared without a trace, and rumors about his death were rife. How could Brent not be excited upon Zen's arrival? He rushed out immediately, albeit a bit perturbed, because he also suspected that someone was pretending to be Zen. But to his intense surprise, the man was Zen himself. Zen, too, was surprised to see Brent. He knew that Brent was a divine-level talent of the ethereal spirit sect, but he did not know that he belonged to the Shi clan. "Hi Brent, it's been a long time. How have you been?" Zen greeted him blandly without enthusiasm. "You have also stepped into the virtual tribulation realm. Let's have a fight, shall we?" Brent wasted no time in challenging Zen. He didn't even bother about the fact that this was a special occasion. Obviously, Zen wouldn't agree. He hadn't come here to challenge Brent, but for the daughter of the Shi clan. "Brent, stop messing around." A middle-aged man followed closely behind Brent. Some keen observers had already recognized him. It was Robin Shi, the head of the Shi clan. Robin Shi cupped his hands in greeting to Zen, and said, "I heard that you arrived at the Shi clan, and I am greatly honored. This is not the place to talk. Come in, please." Zen also cupped his hands and bowed down to Robin Shi. Then he followed the warriors of the Shi clan into the castle. On his way in, Robin Shi wondered why Zen was suddenly visiting them. Zen had disappeared for 2 years and no one knew where he had gone. He was not related to the Shi clan, so he wasn't here visiting his family. It was safe to assume that he was here for Margaret, who had the purple power body. Robin Shi had been worried about her for quite a while, and now Zen had arrived at the right time. Zen sat down in the main hall of the castle and exchanged pleasantries with the people of the Shi clan. Warriors were unlike scholars and did not have any formalities. Robin Shi got straight to the point. "Zen, may I know if you are here for my daughter, Margaret?" Zen nodded, and asked, "Yes. I heard that she also has the purple power body. I would like to know where she is now." Robin Shi clapped his hands to summon a servant beside him. "Quick, go and find Margaret," he ordered. He then sighed and added, "It's my fault for spoiling her too much. Since you have come here for her, you must have known our current crisis. Could you please help us out? I really don't know what to do." Robin Shi wanted to hear what Zen had to say. He knew that Zen must have seen the long line outside, and his words were a clear hint. He wanted Zen to marry his daughter. Brent remained silent, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. If Zen became his brother-in-law, he would have more chances in the future to challenge him. Sooner or later, he would be able to fight against Zen. Zen clearly understood what Robin Shi was trying to say. But he couldn't marry Margaret just because of a crisis, right? More importantly, he didn't think she was willing to marry him. Zen said, "Miss Shi has the purple power body, so it's not safe for her to stay in the ethereal city. I want to bring her to the Cloud Hall to protect her. Cloud Hall's sect protecting arrays should be able to stop Eddie for a while." Robin Shi was very disappointed at Zen's words. Brent was the adopted son of the Shi clan, and he always talked about Zen. So Zen was not a stranger to the Shi clan. It was said that Zen was more talented than Brent. If Robin Shi could make Zen his son-in-law, then it would be very beneficial for Shi clan. However, Zen had made it clear that he was not going to marry his daughter. Robin Shi thought that Zen might change his mind once he saw his daughter. If Zen agreed, Robin Shi would force her to marry him irrespective of how she felt. A look of determination slowly appeared on Robin Zai's face. This could not be delayed any longer. "Zen, if you can persuade my daughter to follow you to the Cloud Hall, then the matter can be solved easily. But as long as she is unmarried, Eddie won't stop trying to take her away. We must think of a way to settle this once and for all," Robin Shi said. Lavender suddenly giggled inside and said via the life vitality, "This old man only wants to marry his daughter off to you. I reckon that woman is as ugly as a pig. That's why the old man is so eager to do it." Zen couldn't be bothered with what Lavender said and simply nodded at Robin Shi. Just then, 2 maids opened the door, and the scent of a young lady blew in. A young girl in plain clothes walked in. She was Margaret Shi. "Margaret, come over here and meet our guest," said Robin Shi eagerly. That servant had told Margaret that her father wanted to see her. She didn't know there was a stranger here. She thought this man was from some large clan and her father wanted to marry her off to him. She had always been against marrying someone she didn't know. As a result, she had a long face. Hearing her father's words, Margaret quickly walked over, her elegant face as cold as ice. She cast a scornful look at Zen. Let me be straight with you. You don't have the qualifications to marry me. Just go back home, she said rudely. Brent's heart sank at his sister's words. He peeked at Robin and immediately knew it was going to be bad. As Brent expected, Robin's face darkened like a piece of charcoal. He suddenly stood up, took a few steps towards her, and said angrily, Margaret, you are too presumptuous. Don't think that just because your great-grandfather dotes on you, you will be able to mess around as you like. The great-grandfather Robin was talking about was none other than Xander. Xander doted on Margaret very much, and that was why Robin Margaret's father, didn't dare to discipline her. He never thought that his daughter would grow up to be such a stubborn girl. He was really hoping that Zen would fall for his daughter at first sight. But now that seemed impossible thanks to her brash behavior. In fact, Zen might even despise her now. How could Robin not get angry? Zen didn't show any anger on his face when being treated so badly for no fault of his. What was more, he hadn't come to ask her hand in marriage. I'm presumptuous. Dad, how can you say that? I'd rather die. She turned her chin up resolutely. She was rather defiant. Robin raised his hand. He was about to slap her, but Margaret was obstinate, and she had no intention of dodging it. However, Zen stepped between them and stopped Robin. He said, Master please calm down. I have something to say to Miss Robin couldn't lose his temper in front of an outsider. He had no choice but to suppress the anger in his heart. Zen stared at the girl in front of him and said, Miss you've misunderstood. I'm not here to woo you. She scowled at him. I know, you're only here to get to know me. At the same time, you want to show me your strength and eloquence, and tell me which clan you belong to and what immeasurable potential you have. Come on, just admit it. You are here with the same purpose as the guys outside. A person like you can only be described in one word, hypocrite. You are even more disgusting than those who are standing outside, she said mockingly. Ha ha, Brent could not stop himself from laughing upon hearing this. Brent, what are you laughing at? What's so funny? An annoyed Margaret berated him. Zen was speechless. He hadn't thought that this quiet and refined young lady would be so bold and energetic. Moreover, she had a wild imagination. Now Zen said seriously, I'm not trying to get to know you. You have the purple power body, so it's too dangerous for you to stay here. I have come to take you away from the ethereal city. Take me away, just you, she asked warily. Leave with me, or die right now. It's your choice. Although Zen's tone was unusually calm, what he said was the cold, hard truth. Chapter 674, At Death's Door. Zen was not joking. His sister, Yan Luo, was truly the most important person in his life. Margaret was like Marilyn, their mere existence was a threat to Yan. Marilyn had set herself against Zen, so he had no choice other than to kill her. Margaret, however, was completely innocent. However, regardless of whether Margaret was innocent or not, Zen still could not tolerate Yan being threatened. That was why he had decisively told Margaret that she could either follow him back to the Cloud Hall or be killed. It was that simple. Unsurprisingly, when Zen told Margaret this, she was stunned. Ever since she could remember, she had been considered the smartest girl around. Apart from Brent, she was the youngest in her generation and was the most beloved daughter of the family. Even Xander, who seldom came back to the clan's castle, was fond of her. Every time he came back, he would ask Margaret to meet him. Since Xander was in charge of the ethereal spirit sect, he had rarely shown up in the clan's castle. Even if Robin wanted to meet him, planning for it would be a real pain. But despite his frequent absence, Xander had always been fond of Margaret, his great-granddaughter. At this critical moment, he was actually willing to send Brent to accompany Margaret because he knew of the good relationship between the two of them. One could only imagine how much Xander had doted on her. It was also because of this that the members of the clan chose to tolerate her behavior again and again, even giving her ample time to choose the man she was going to marry. They had already waited for so long, yet she still had not picked anyone she liked. If she was only a random girl from some branch of the clan, the members of the clan might have already married her off to someone, by hook or by crook. Considering all the love that she had received from the people around her since she was very young, Margaret didn't expect that this man in front of her would be so insolent towards her, even daring to threaten that he would kill her if she refused to leave with him. Robin and Brent were also stunned. They could tell that Zen was not joking. As for the other members of the She clan, such as Margaret's seniors, their expressions significantly darkened after Zen's remarks. Although everyone was having a headache about Margaret's marriage, they wouldn't dare force her to marry someone. So how dare an outsider come to the She clan's territory and think that he could treat Margaret like that? Brent frowned. Although he was an adopted son, he and Margaret had grown up together since they were young. The two of them were even closer than those related by blood. How could Zen threaten to hurt Margaret? Just as Brent was about to speak up and push Zen away from Margaret, Robin waved his hand and stopped him. With a confused expression, Brent turned to look at Robin. Margaret was Robin's daughter. Wasn't he worried about her safety at all? Although Brent felt fully puzzled, he chose to stay put and shut up. Margaret was Robin's youngest daughter. How could he not worry about her safety? However, Robin had an intuition that Zen would not really do anything that would hurt his daughter. Also, he believed that his daughter was so willful to the point that someone should indeed come and teach her a good lesson. There was no need to expound on Margaret's revered position in the She clan. No one dared offend her. Even as her father, Robin did not dare to be too critical of her. Everyone had to respect Xander because even though he rarely returned to the She clan's castle, he was still the clan's pillar of support. Other than the members of the She clan, who in the entire ethereal city had the qualifications to teach Margaret a lesson. The young man in front of them seemed to be very different from a normal person. The story of Zen, now considered a legend, berating Eddie was still fresh in everyone's mind. His story had been quickly made into songs being sung by patrons at tea houses and taverns. Warriors had taken a liking to it, and ordinary people had embraced it as their own. Zen was not even afraid of Eddie at all. So how could he be afraid of Xander? Robin wanted to see if Zen had the ability to subdue his daughter. You want me to die? Do you have the ability to do that? Margaret's face was pale, but her temper and stubbornness still didn't leave her. Even though she had an intuition that Zen would keep his word, she bit her lips, took a deep breath, kept a brave face on, and kept pressing on. Besides, why would she be afraid? There were so many members of the She clan present. The young man in front of her was at the virtual tribulation realm. It was true that Margaret was a little fearful of him, but a warrior who was at the early stage of the virtual tribulation realm couldn't do much to her family. Her father was a warrior at the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm, and Brent had just stepped into the virtual tribulation realm. Besides, Brent was a divine-level talent. He was definitely stronger than this guy in front of her. Zen's gaze was calm as he stared into Margaret's eyes. I've already said that there are two options. Leave with me, or I'll kill you right here, right now. Choose between the two, he said calmly and coldly. What if I don't want to choose? Margaret replied, staring at Zen with the same intensity. Then I'll help you choose one. Zen snorted lightly and actually reached out his hand to grab Margaret. How dare you? An elder of the She clan shouted. However, Robin fiercely glared at the elder. The elder saw that and immediately understood what he wanted to say, so he stopped his protests and leaned back in his seat. His face, however, showed how angry he was. When Margaret saw that her father not only did not help her but also prevented the elder from taking action, a look of despair suddenly appeared on her face. A teenage girl's feelings of self-pity were the most likely to arise, and so she immediately cried out, "So what if I die?" The moment she finished speaking, Zen's hand was already around her supple neck, ready to choke her to death. It was at this moment that Zen said, "You're not afraid of death because you've never known what death is like." Suddenly, the malicious aura surged out from Zen's body. He had accumulated quite a bit of malicious aura in the Tower of Sin and the Dark Nether Cave. The malicious aura erupted like that of a descending fiend, showing its great strength and mercilessness. The malicious aura was also known as the aura of slaughter. It was a kind of aura that one accumulated from killing others. It was a type of curse that came from the creatures that one had killed. This monstrous malicious aura gushed out, and the hearts of over 10,000 people in the entire castle trembled, to the point that even those outside the castle were alarmed. What happened to the She clan's castle? Could Eddie have sneaked in? Why is there so much malicious aura? I don't think so. Eddie could be righteous at some times and terribly evil at other times, but he hasn't cultivated in the killing way. He does not have such a ferocious malicious aura. Then who is it? Who would dare to mess around with the She clan in their own castle? Is he not afraid of the ethereal spirit sect? Many warriors speculated. All of them wouldn't dare trespass into the She clan's castle, so they could only make wild guesses. Margaret started choking and suffocating. She felt like she was not facing a person, but a devil that had crawled out of torture. This man would kill her without any hesitation. Since she was a child, she had never gone too far from She clan's castle. Everyone in the clan doted on her. That was why she was innocent yet so willful. This made her even more simple-minded than Bess, the female disciple of the fish dragon sect. She had thought that she was not afraid of death because she had never encountered the danger of death ever before. All her life, she firmly believed that the members of the She clan would protect her and die for her. But now, Margaret felt that she was very close to death. If the man in front of her used a little bit more of his strength, she was sure that she would die. She was already teetering on the edge of life and death. Why won't Dad save me? Why won't he make a move? Why are the members of the She clan staying still? She thought, tears already pooling in her eyes. Finally, she began to panic. In this situation, her survival instinct kicked in, and she began to struggle. Dad, save me. But this did not lessen the hold of Zen on her neck. Slowly, her voice became shrill and colored with fear. As much as it was hurting him, Robin had no intentions of moving, and looked as if he hadn't heard her. The malicious aura released by Zen was still rising. At the same time, he also released a portion of his soul pressure. Margaret definitely wouldn't be able to block Zen's soul pressure. If the pressure was too great, she might pass out immediately, so Zen didn't release much of it. However, he made sure that it was enough for her to feel that the threat that he was posing against her was constantly increasing. Are you sure you still want to choose death? Zen asked, his voice deep and demonic. As he stared at the young girl in front of him, he thought of how he did not like being an evil person. The girl he was choking looked very beautiful and soft, so usually, men would feel like protecting her, even if it was the first time they had seen her. Zen was no exception to that. However, he valued his sister more. Margaret's lips were turning pale. When Zen's malicious aura and soul pressure slightly lessened, she immediately said, I choose to go with you. After that proclamation, all of Zen's malicious aura was instantly poured into the Killing Sword Mountain. At the same time, his soul pressure disappeared without a trace. Margaret was put down, and immediately, she took a deep breath and then panted heavily. Seeing Margaret act like this, the members of the She clan, including Robin and Brent, felt their hearts ache for her, but they were forced to do nothing. Margaret was like a frightened little bird as she stared at Zen, great fear in her eyes. She chose to give in the face of death, and at the same time, she had developed a deep hate for Zen. Chapter 675, The Transmission Arrays of the Ethereal City. A myriad of emotions crossed through Margaret's face as she looked at Zen. Tell me your name, she demanded through gritted teeth. Margaret rarely left her home, but she was more or less well informed about the young elites of the Central region. She had not participated in the martial arts contest of Oracle City 2 years ago, but she had lent Brent a hand in studying and forming strategies against his potential opponents. This man in front of her was undoubtedly young, and yet he had already reached the virtual tribulation realm. He was no ordinary warrior. Earlier, Robin had sent word for her to go out to meet him, but without telling her anything about this man. Conflict had immediately arisen between her and Zen at their first contact, leaving no space for Robin to properly introduce them to each other. Why, so you can find an opportunity to take revenge afterwards? Zen asked with a smile, seemingly unaffected by her obvious aggression. That's right, Margaret answered him quickly and without any trace of hesitation. She had no intentions of hiding anything. Granted, she was only a beginner of the internal elixir realm, but she had the purple power body. Once she had trained enough, her strength would be unmatched. A cultivator with the purple power body would be able to stay in the purple power world for a period of time after reaching the internal elixir realm. The length of the duration would increase more and more by cultivating herself to the virtual tribulation realm. Finally, it would then be possible to summon the 99 billion huge swords and the true spirit from the purple power world. However, the cost of such power would be extremely high. Marilyn had previously tried to summon the true spirit upon her encounter with Zen at the martial arts contest. According to the Cyan Dragon's words, if Marilyn had been successful, Zen would have undoubtedly met his end. Zen did not even flinch at Margaret's threats. With a small smile, he said, I look forward to it. My name is Zen Luo. Zen Luo. Margaret repeated his name slowly, her eyebrows knitted together as the sound of his name recalled a familiar ring from her memory. After a brief pause, a look of recognition and astonishment dawned on her face. Turning to Brent with her eyes blown wide open, she exclaimed, Brent, is he that same Zen you've been talking about? She had never been outside of the ethereal city, but she had heard of Zen's name no less than 1,000 times. Ever since the end of the martial arts contest, his name had been on Brent's lips. He had talked of him endlessly each time he returned home from the ethereal spirit sect. Brent had deeply regretted not having been able to fight Zen, and it was as if this lost chance haunted him to no end. Day by day, there were only more and more stories about Zen, each one more extraordinary than the last. Word had spread around that he was even a greater talent than Brent in martial arts. Furthermore, he had enough mastery of the runes to have set up an impenetrable sect-protecting array that held off even the arrogant Eddie's attacks. People speculated that Zen had far more superior rune skills over Arnold. Arnold was originally a disciple of the ethereal spirit sect, and so he had quickly gained attention and later on, great fame in the ethereal city. In the south, people had erected a giant statue in his honor. Endless talk about this legendary figure resounded on the streets of the southern district, and his great achievements never failed to reach Margaret's ears whenever she went there, and for good reason. The sect-protecting array that he had built protected the ethereal spirit sect up to this day. However, here was a man who, according to rumors, possessed skills that surpassed even that of the legendary Arnold. At the beginning, such talk seemed incredulous to her. Words traveled quickly, and the stories that circulated were not always as close to the truth as they seemed. It was impossible that Zen surpassed Brent's talent. After all, her younger brother had always been the most gifted disciple in the entire central region. His genius was a divine gift from the gods. It was only a matter of time before he reached the Soul Sea realm. The ethereal spirit sect had regarded him as its most valuable treasure. It was simply impossible that there existed a more talented person than her younger brother. But Zen's skills did not stop at martial arts. He also showed promising potential as a runic expert. No one in the whole central region had ever displayed such skills and growth as him. What was even more unbelievable was that he had only been a mere youth, not even reaching 18 years of age at that time. Stories about him and his incredible feats only multiplied as time went by, and even Margaret, who rarely cared about the outside world, was filled with curiosity towards such a character. She had begun to think that if there was a chance, she would like to meet this Zen and see just what kind of person he was. However, after his journey to the Immortal Mist's celestial tomb, Zen had disappeared. Brent himself, who had participated in the journey, presumed him dead. Margaret had always regarded this as a pity. Now, she had lost all chances of ever meeting the man that her younger brother had endlessly talked about. She eyed him from head to toe as he stood before her in the flesh. He was most likely around 20 years of age, as he was only 18 years old 2 years ago. The man in front of her matched that description, but was he that same Zen? Hadn't he died in the celestial tomb? How come he was here in their midst? Brent blinked his eyes at his sister and sighed. Yes, sister, he's exactly that Zen. At that moment, the reason of his appearance dawned on her. She now understood why Zen had offered her two difficult choices. No one in the central region was unaware of the fate that had befallen Yan, his sister. Eddie had her in his grasp. Some of Margaret's irritation slowly dissipated and was replaced by quiet respect as she realized that Zen would stop at nothing to save his sister. He would sacrifice everything, if necessary. Naturally, she also understood that if she were to fall into Eddie's hands, Zen's sister would be in great danger. However, despite her understanding of the situation, Margaret still couldn't forgive Zen. She would not let him off so easily after having treated her so rudely, and in front of her family. Margaret was proud by nature. Reining in her resentment, she wore a stoic expression in her face and said, "Well then. Even if you are that Zen, you be sure that I will pay back your rudeness in full sometime in the future," she said, her voice still laced with anger. Zen merely gave her a brief smile. "I'll wait," he replied calmly. Robin let out a sigh of relief from the side, grateful that the tension had not exploded into full-blown hostility. "Since you've already made your decision, then it's fine. In fact, the leader of Cloud Hall has already invited Margaret to keep her away from here, but this child is so stubborn that she has kept on refusing to go to Cloud Hall," he said, letting out another huff of air. Then, he added, "It's already noon, and the servants have finished preparations for lunch. You can set off after you eat." A transmission array connecting the ethereal city and the cloudy city allowed for a direct passage, so going from there to Cloud Hall would be no trouble at all. Zen gave them a slight bow and said politely, "I am grateful for your kindness." All of them moved towards the dining room, except for one figure. Margaret stalked off to the other direction, leaving behind with only one sentence. I'm not going to eat with this man. I'll be out after lunch, she declared, then walked away. A wry smile appeared on Robin's face. He turned to Zen and said apologetically, "Please forgive her. My daughter has always been like this." Margaret's hostile attitude did not matter one bit to Zen. What he did not know was that this lunch would bring about a huge change in his plans. The transmission arrays of the ethereal city were located at the Western District, the busiest, most bustling area of the city. 2 transmission arrays were built in the open space beside the Skyworm River to the western border of the city. Of the 2, one provided a passage to the Cloudy City, while the other one led to the Oracle City. A huge fortune was expended in constructing the transmission arrays. It was not comparable to the massive transmission arrays that allowed traveling back and forth between continents, but it still covered a considerable area, spanning across half of the central region. In addition to this, these 3 cities were the largest in the central region, and so they had the largest number of warriors. Every day, there would be countless of them who would need to use these 2 transmission arrays to get to Cloudy City or to Oracle City. Even some ordinary merchants would pay a high toll to transport valuable goods through the transmission arrays. The frequent use of the transmission arrays led to the high costs in maintaining them. Today, as usual, there was a long line by the bank of the Skyworm River, with people waiting their turns to use the arrays. This month had been especially busy for the 2 transmission arrays. There was word going around that Eddie was plotting an attack on Ethereal City with the warriors of the Heavenly Evil sect. The seeds of fear had taken their roots in the city, and people were hurrying to leave in order to escape from the impending disaster. They had a choice between the Oracle City and the Cloudy City to ensure their safety. With the relentless demand, the cost of transportation through the transmission arrays had risen greatly, doubling the amount of the usual price. Even so, a great number of people who were willing to spend paid such a high price, if it meant their safety. Money mattered little in comparison to their lives. Today, the atmosphere around the crowd was uncharacteristically tense. The air was burdened with a growing impatience from the waiting people. Martial cultivators stood stiffly as they waited their turn to use the passage, and the civilians grew anxious for their own survival as threat of Eddie's attack loomed closer and closer each day. Some of them had been waiting for about half a day. The pressure was a ticking time bomb, and the heightened frustration exploded when 2 men tried to cut in line. The other cultivators were immediately annoyed. One of them reproached the 2 men furiously, shouting out, "Hey, hey, hey! What do you think you're doing? Why are you cutting in line? Even if you have something urgent to attend to, you should still obey the rules. Everyone here has been waiting for a long time." The others soon followed, throwing criticisms at the 2. "You 2 have no manners. Have some shame." Hearing the crowd scolding, the 2 warriors turned around and said with a sneer, "Yes, I'm cutting in line and ignoring the rules, but so what? Some of us have more important jobs to do. What, you want to fight us?" The other warriors fell silent at their intimidation. Most of them warriors were nature creatures, of which only a handful had reached the illuminating soul realm, while the 2 warriors cutting in line were at the internal elixir realm. There was too great a gap between the 2 groups. Provoking the 2 warriors further would only result to the other group's loss. The silence of their surrender only served to fan the 2 warriors' insolence. "That's right, you lot should know your place. Weigh your own strength before you sputter out your nonsense," they jeered. A quiet discontent settled over the crowd as the line slowly moved forward. The transmission arrays flashed white every time someone entered the space channel. As the 2 internal elixir realm warriors approached one of the transmission arrays, one of them said in a lazy tone, "All right, let's do it." The other person threw back a haughty glance to the others behind, as if challenging them to stop him. Then, he took out a purple-black bead from his chest and threw it towards the transmission array. The next moment, they both abruptly retreated. Chapter 676, Take Action. Everything happened so quickly. There were a few ethereal city guards who were standing by the transmission array, but since they were only at the ultimate level of the illuminating soul realm, they were slow to react to what was happening. Destroying a transmission array wasn't something that would benefit a person, and it would be highly harmful to others. Because of that, under normal circumstances, no one would maliciously destroy one. When the others saw the 2 internal elixir realm warriors throw out the purple-black bead, they immediately retreated to the side. After that, they saw that the bead emitted a fine line of lightning in the transmission array. Then, the radiance of the lightning burst out, emitting an intense light as well as the power of space. At the same time, violent explosion rang out. Clap, clap, At the moment of the ear-splitting explosion, the area around the transmission array was swallowed by the bright light. The warriors who were queuing up and the guards that were standing by the transmission array were instantly annihilated. They didn't even have the time to scream before they met their doom. They have destroyed the transmission array. This is the Space and Thunder bead. It contains the Thunder Law and the Space Law. It can completely destroy the space channel. Why did they destroy the transmission array? What is their goal? The warriors who had a considerable distance from the site of explosion had already cried out in alarm, and had started to theorize what had happened. It wasn't easy to destroy a transmission array. Once it was built, the entire space channel would be very stable. Even if the base of the transmission array was destroyed, the space channel would not be damaged. All they needed to do was to rebuild the base. However, the Space and Thunder bead was different. The transmission array was something that wouldn't be easily destroyed, but the said bead was specially designed for destroying it. The power of thunder and lightning contained within the bead would destroy its base. However, the worst thing about it was the power of space contained within it, because it had the ability to mess up the space channel in the transmission array, and if that happened, the space channel could no longer be rebuilt. After the two internal Elixir Realm warriors had succeeded, another transmission array leading to Oracle City, which was 1 mile away, was also destroyed. By then, the two ways leading to Cloudy City and Oracle City had been ruined. What is going on? I think I understand. These people are most likely from the Heavenly Evil sect. They destroyed transmission arrays, so that the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance won't be able to lend a helping hand. It's very likely that Eddie is about to launch an attack. It was only a matter of time before people started identifying the reason for the attacks. Ethereal City had already done its best to prepare for such scenarios in advance. The Ethereal Spirit sect had sent many warriors to patrol Ethereal City. Normally, the warriors guarding transmission arrays would only be at the low levels of the Illuminating Soul Realm, but now, there were several more who were at the ultimate level of the Illuminating Soul Realm. If the Heavenly Evil sect really wanted to take action, it was impossible for anyone to guard against and even stop them. Even if the Ethereal Spirit sect sent their best warriors at the Virtual Tribulation Realm as a defense tactic, the Heavenly Evil sect would still send their warriors at the Virtual Tribulation Realm in order to destroy the transmission arrays. After all, protecting something was much more difficult than destroying it. The Heavenly Evil sect was not planning an attack anymore, they had already begun. The Ethereal Spirit sect was built on top of a tall mountain, right outside Ethereal City. Now, in the outside perimeters of the Ethereal Spirit sect, a layer of faint purple light could be found. The thousands of runes inside the sect formed a circular rune of 8 diagrams. This sect protecting array was the work of Arnold. It was called the Illusory Array. Before the appearance of Zen's sect protecting array, the Illusory Array had been the strongest sect protecting array in the central region. Outside of the sect protecting array, tens of thousands of warriors were floating in the sky. Most of them had reached the Illuminating Soul Realm, and a small portion of them were at the Internal Elixir Realm. Dozens belonged to the Virtual Tribulation Realm. All these warriors wore long black robes, with 2 words embedded on their chests: Heavenly Evil. They were the Divine Kingdom army of the Heavenly Evil sect. While others called them the Heavenly Evil sect, they called themselves the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom. All the warriors in the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom used to be independent warriors. The world of warriors was immensely cruel. While other warriors had grown up in sects, independent warriors had to exert a far greater effort to survive. Moreover, they were often bullied by the sect disciples, so they all held a grudge against the great sects. The reason why Eddie was able to build his divine kingdom as smoothly as he did was that he knew exactly what these independent warriors thought. He claimed that he would unite all the independent warriors and overthrow all the small and large sects in the central region. After he built his divine kingdom, he would share the kingdom with independent warriors. And because of that, this had to be said, Eddie was really smart. He gave the independent warriors a space to vent their anger towards the sects, and he was able to give them what they wanted. Hence, in a short period of time, he had amassed a large number of followers. When other sects got wind of what was happening, they frantically began to try to stop the independent warriors. However, it was already too late. Eddie's Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom was growing at an extremely fast pace, and was quickly becoming the biggest power in the central region. On a grade perspective, the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom already had the qualifications to become a 6th grade sect, just without Soul Sea Realm Masters. But to be fair, it was not that easy to become a Soul Sea Realm Master. Because of that, Eddie got stuck, and so he anxiously tried to find a third girl with a purple power body to help him break through to the Soul Sea realm. By then, his heavenly evil divine kingdom would be worthy of its name. It was one of the reasons why Eddie wanted to attack the ethereal spirit sect. Furthermore, if he managed to destroy the ethereal spirit sect, the heavenly evil divine kingdom's reputation would further spread. If that ever happened, the number of independent warriors who followed him would definitely multiply. Even the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance would not be able to stop them. Warriors. The sect in front of us is the #1 sect in the world, the ethereal spirit sect. Did they bully you in the past? Eddie roared, as he stood in front of the Divine Kingdom army. Yes. There were over 10,000 warriors there, and even the weakest of them had reached the illuminating soul realm. Their combined voices could easily shake the earth. Although the ethereal spirit sect was the #1 sect in the world, its influence hadn't spread throughout the central region. It was impossible that these independent warriors were all bullied by the sect. But as independent warriors, they were oppressed by sect warriors. For example, when exploring a dangerous land, independent warriors would often travel alone. At most, they would travel together in 2 or 3, but sect warriors would usually have dozens of companions. Any time that the both of them stumbled upon a golden opportunity or treasure, independent warriors would always inevitably lose, and get nothing. It was just like that in the world of warriors. Whoever was the most powerful would keep the treasures for themselves. It was just the law of the jungle. If the independent warriors were in the sect warriors' position, they would undoubtedly do the same. As Eddie had fully raised the morale of the troops, none of them thought deeply about what Eddie really wanted. Very good. Then today will be the day the ethereal spirit sect is destroyed. Eddie roared coldly. Just then, a figure flew out from the Divine Kingdom army. It was a white-faced scholar-like man at the middle level of the virtual tribulation realm. He held an ancient folding fan in his hand. As the folding fan unfurled, everyone saw the word, Darius, written on it. He was the military advisor of the Divine Kingdom army. He used to be an independent warrior and was quite famous in the south of the central region. However, he had offended the people from the mysterious Luna Hall, so his family was killed by them. Darius had stayed hidden all these years, and when he heard that Eddie was about to found a divine kingdom, he knew that his chance had come. From his point of view, whether Eddie could build a divine kingdom or not was not important. What was important was that he would be able to take advantage of Eddie's power to destroy the mysterious Luna Hall. In a sense, both of them were using each other for their own personal gains. I just received news that the young lady from the Shi family is not in the ethereal spirit sect. Instead, she is in Ethereal City, Darius said faintly. Oh, Eddie's eyes narrowed. It seems like Xander really doesn't take me seriously. Well, I think that means I should go to Ethereal City. The 2 transmission arrays in Ethereal City have already been destroyed. However, I'm afraid that the Shi family prefers death over dishonor, Darius said. Eddie frowned, a cautious look on his face. Darius was right. The Shi family wouldn't give him the girl with a purple power body without an intense fight. Chapter 677, Escape. Aside from the news about Miss Shi, we've also acquired an interesting new piece of information, Darius said upon seeing Eddie's grim expression. What is it? Eddie asked. Zen has returned, Darius immediately replied. Eddie's eyes immediately flashed with a malicious aura. Zen. HMPH. He actually returned. Rumors and speculations about Zen dying had spread all over Central Region, but Eddie did not believe any of it. He had seen firsthand how Zen became the ultimate winner of the Wheel of Fortune, signifying that he was a man of great destiny. Eddie did not believe that Zen was someone who would die so easily. The only way Eddie would ever believe Zen's death would be if he killed him with his own hands. What are you going to do now? Darius asked cautiously, clearly aware of the malicious aura that emanated from Eddie. Temporarily halt all attacks on the ethereal spirit sect. Station everyone 100 miles away while we wait for Simon's men to arrive. Do not make a move until I come. Eddie ordered. Simon, the Poison King, had recently joined Eddie's heavenly evil divine kingdom despite them initially being on opposing sides. It was Eddie who extended the invitation and Simon accepted after weighing up the cost and benefits. Despite the conflict between them at the start, Simon had since put aside past grudges once he came to realize the benefits of joining Eddie in his divine kingdom. At that moment, Simon was already rushing over with a group of independent warriors. The ethereal spirit sect must not be underestimated. It was not heralded as the #1 sect in the central region for no reason. Although its sect-protecting array constructed by Arnold was not on par with Cloud Hall's, Eddie knew that the illusory array was still capable of causing a great deal of trouble for his army. Moreover, the ethereal spirit sect had Xander, and Eddie did not dare to look down upon him. The joint forces of the septuplets of ethereal spirit were comparable to a life and death realm master's strength. It would be difficult, but if he managed to get the ethereal spirit sect to yield, Eddie was sure that his heavenly evil divine kingdom would reap huge benefits. After Darius left to enforce his orders, a plan was already brewing in Eddie's mind. "I want to see just how he will escape this time," he muttered to himself with a sneer. Then, he turned into a beam of light and charged straight towards Ethereal City. Meanwhile, inside the ethereal spirit sect, Xander stood in a huge 8 diagrams and looked up to the sky with a complicated expression. The septuplets of ethereal spirit formed a unique formation that was in accordance with the shape of the Big Dipper. They looked up solemnly at the large number of warriors in the sky. The majority of their attackers were at the illuminating soul realm and did not pose any immediate threats, as the illusory array assured the death of any warrior below the internal elixir realm. The problem, however, was that Eddie's army also contained a handful of internal elixir realm warriors and had more virtual tribulation realm martial artists than the ethereal spirit sect. If a war did break out between them, the outcome was uncertain. Xander had already foreseen Eddie's attack. In fact, many people had already predicted it. What they did not expect, however, was for him to come so soon. Xander would have never thought that Eddie would actually dare to make a move against the strongest sect in Central Region. In this aspect, Xander paled in comparison of Eddie's great ambition and courage. All elders and disciples of the ethereal spirit sect were alert and ready for battle. However, the sight of Eddie transforming into a streak of light and leaving elicited a few shocked gasps. What was more surprising was the sudden but orderly retreat of the heavenly evil sect warriors. "Sir, Eddie is flying towards Ethereal City," one of the septuplets of ethereal spirit announced. Xander's eyes widened. He must be heading towards the She clan. "This is my fault. I shouldn't have pampered her too much. Her willfulness and my indulgence have only brought harm upon us all," Xander sighed. It took everything in Xander not to rush out and stop Eddie. He might not be as powerful as Eddie, but he knew he had the ability to contend with Eddie and delay him for a bit in the ethereal city. But his role as ethereal spirit sect's leader prevented him from doing so. His place was within the sect, where he was to take charge during such a crisis. Although the She clan was important to Xander, the ethereal spirit sect was more important. The entire She clan and ethereal city were established under the protection of the ethereal spirit sect. There was a saying, "If the skin does not exist, then where would the hair adhere to?" One thing is dependent on the other. Xander was fully aware of what was more important. "They're retreating. Should we rush out?" one of the septuplets of ethereal spirit asked. The retreat of the opposing army was a chance for the ethereal spirit sect to launch a counterattack by taking their enemies by surprise. It was a good chance for them to turn the tides, but Xander still shook his head. What if it was a trap? "No," his voice resonated while his eyes filled with determination. "We will remain and guard this place." From the exact moment he assumed the position as the leader of the ethereal spirit sect, Xander's life had been firmly tied to the entire sect. Just then, the beam of light neared Ethereal City but was suddenly blocked by an invisible force. A flying ban had been enforced around the city. Such restrictions were very popular 1,000 years ago and were enforced by many other cities. However, too many warriors complained and the flying ban was removed. It was only Ethereal City that followed the old convention and retained their restriction against flying. Eddie could only snort as he casually threw a punch and destroyed the ban. Once he arrived in the Ethereal City, he quickly headed for the She clan's castle. The luncheon in She clan's castle lasted for an hour. Robin, the clan master, held Zen with high regard and, despite telling him that it would only be a simple meal, treated Zen to specially made dishes of the highest quality. And it cost much longer time to prepare the dishes. Brent continued to harp about his regret of not getting the chance to fight Zen all throughout the meal. "Zen, if there's a chance, I will definitely go to Cloud Hall and challenge you. When that time comes, you have to come out and fight with me," he insisted. Brent was so stubborn. Zen smiled helplessly and was forced to agree in the end. Robin smiled in amusement. He knew his adopted son's temperament very well. Brent was not a sore loser, and even if he lost this fight he was proposing, he wouldn't regret it. Brent was about to say something else when his complexion suddenly paled. He quickly reached into his space ring and took out a token that had turned blood red. Zen frowned at his sudden change in demeanor. "What's wrong?" he asked. Even Robin's face turned pale when he saw the blood-red token. The color of the ethereal spirit sect's token signaled 3 different situations: emerald green for normal, yellow for a state of high alert, and blood red once a war arrived at their doorstep. The token had been yellow for the past few days, but it had now turned to the most ominous shade of red. The ethereal spirit sect is under attack. I need to go there right away, Brent announced. After entering the virtual tribulation realm, he had become one of the top warriors of the ethereal spirit sect. There was no way he could stay in the castle with the threat of war upon them. Zen's face darkened at his words. He immediately stood up and cupped his hands to Robin. I'll take the young lady out of the ethereal city right now. Had he not stayed for the luncheon, Zen would have already left Ethereal City with Margaret hours ago. He did not expect that a war would suddenly break out while he was casually eating lunch with the Shi clan. Robin nodded. I'll bring you to her right now. While Brent rushed to the ethereal spirit sect, Robin led Zen towards Margaret's residence. Inside her residence, Margaret was alone and sulking, thinking that she was about to leave the castle. Her table was full of delicious food, but she didn't eat a single bite. Her mind was a mess and she was in no mood to eat. Bam! Her door and screens were suddenly smashed into smithereens as Zen forced his entry into her room. The 2 screens were made of precious jade and were of high value. Margaret liked them very much and had spent a lot of effort getting them 2 years ago. To think that Zen broke them just like that made her furious. You must pay for the screens, she shouted. This guy is truly despicable. He didn't show any respect to me at all, she thought to herself as she seethed with anger. Robin ignored his daughter's tantrum. Margaret, forget about the screens. You have to go now, he shouted in desperation. He did not know what to say to make his daughter behave at such a critical moment, and it wasn't really the time to lecture her. Zen did not even bother calming her down. There was no time to be gentle given the urgency of the situation. He just went directly to her and roughly grabbed her hand. Let's go. He then immediately flew up and smashed her ceiling into pieces. Margaret's residence was made of wood and sturdy iron, but it was reduced to nothing by Zen just like that. Chapter 678, Illusion. Zen shot up into the sky and smashed the beams. As soon as the beams broke, the house began to collapse and everything in the courtyard fell to the ground. Oh, no, my courtyard. Margaret was on the verge of tears. Zen sighed inwardly. This young lady didn't seem to understand the situation she was in, but he didn't have the time or the patience to sit down with her and analyze the situation and the danger she was facing. If this matter wasn't related to Yan, he wouldn't even care about this stupid girl. Carrying Margaret, Zen madly rushed in the direction of the transmission array. Although Ethereal City was enormous, with his current flying speed, Zen wouldn't take long to reach his destination. However, at this moment, a strong aura descended from the sky. Zen's face fell when he sensed this aura. Eddie is coming, his eyes flashed. At the sight of Eddie, Margaret turned pale. Just a moment ago, she hadn't even been close to figuring out what was going on, but now, she knew. She'd never expected that the things the elders of the Shi family had been worrying about would actually happen. Zen Luo, Eddie roared at Zen from above. You're fast, but if you hadn't come here, you might have lived a little longer. Now you're courting death. I'm going to kill you today. Eddie had once been greatly frustrated by Zen, but he hadn't been able to do anything about it, because Zen had been hiding in the Cloud Hall sect protecting array. However, things had changed now. There was no sect protecting array to keep Zen safe anymore. Eddie knew how good Zen's luck was. But if he didn't personally kill Zen, he would never be able to live in peace. Moreover, in just 2 years, Zen had been able to step into the virtual tribulation realm. Although he was only at the primary level, his progress shocked and frightened Eddie. In another 3 to 5 years, Zen would be able to break through to the Soul Sea realm. When that time came, there was no way Eddie would be able to defeat Zen. In fact, Zen would be able to snap him into 2 as easily as snapping a twig. Eddie's grand plan was to found his divine kingdom, so he couldn't allow such a huge threat to live in this world. He had to kill Zen today no matter what. For that reason, he had even temporarily stopped attacking the ethereal spirit sect. Anyone could see how determined Eddie was. Whoosh! Zen refused to listen to Eddie's nonsense. He quickly rushed toward the Skyworm River in Ethereal City with Margaret, while Eddie chased closely behind him. The distance between the two of them was only a few miles. I hope I can make it in time. Zen frowned. He was dragging Margaret behind him. Margaret could only hear the sound of the wind blowing past her ears. Her mind was in a state of chaos. When Zen arrived at the Skyworm River, his heart sank. He could see two streams of black smoke coming from a distance. Even though he couldn't see the transmission arrays, he could already guess what had happened. As he flew over the two transmission arrays, he lowered his head slightly and saw that they had been charred to ashes. He didn't slow down but continued to fly ahead. You wanted to escape through the transmission array? No way. In order to hinder the reinforcements of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance, cutting off the two transmission arrays was the most important part of this attack on the ethereal spirit sect. But Eddie hadn't expected that Zen would be trapped. But since Zen had nowhere to go now, Eddie didn't rush toward him. He was enjoying the process of chasing Zen. There was no way Zen could solve the current situation. Eddie believed that even though Zen was extremely lucky, no one but Xander could save him now. However, given the current situation, Eddie was also sure that Xander, the head of the ethereal spirit sect, wouldn't dare to leave his sect. Zen knew that as well. He was confident that with his current strength and cultivation level, he'd be able to escape if he unleashed his forceful energy. Unfortunately, he was carrying a burden with him that he couldn't leave behind. His face darkening, he suddenly pulled Margaret close. Ah! Margaret screeched as Zen pulled her into his arms. Being pressed against Zen's body, Margaret could feel his heartbeat. Despite the dangerous situation they were in now, Margaret blushed. "What are you doing?" she asked angrily. Ignoring her words, Zen grabbed her by the waist and lifted her up onto his shoulder. The forceful energy in his body instantly erupted and mixed with the cloud-chasing lion's innate talent, doubling his speed. So far, Eddie had been leisurely following Zen. Although Zen was fast, his speed was nothing to Eddie. Moreover, Zen was dragging a burden behind him. So when Zen suddenly turned into a thin line and explosively shot forward, it came as a shock to Eddie. Zen's speed had increased by several times. Dang it! Realizing that he had once again underestimated Zen, Eddie cursed. The forceful energy within his body started to speed up as well. But it was almost impossible for Eddie to catch up with Zen now. Zen's speed was truly incomparable. Luckily, the eruption of forceful energy could only last for a very short time. It wouldn't be able to last as long as life vitality, so Zen could only sprint for a short period of time. Although Zen was using the eruption of his forceful energy to increase the distance between him and Eddie, the situation was still not optimistic. Eddie was still close on his tail. And the central region was vast. There was still a long way to go to Oracle City or the Cloud Hall. Once Zen's forceful energy was exhausted, Eddie would catch up with him in no time. Margaret, who was lying on Zen's shoulder, couldn't hear anything except the strong wind. Zen's speed was too fast. They had left Ethereal City in an instant. Ever since she was young, she had never left Ethereal City or ventured out on a tour. She'd never thought that the first time she stepped foot out of Ethereal City would be in such a situation. As Zen's first wave of forceful energy depleted and Eddie's flying speed gradually increased, the distance between them grew shorter. "Eddie is right behind us," Margaret said nervously. "Shut up. I don't need you to remind me." Zen knew that Eddie was quickly approaching. But since he was flying with just his life vitality, he wasn't as fast as Eddie. "Zen, you'd better surrender. You won't be able to escape today. Don't waste your time," Eddie said coldly. Zen's expression didn't change at all. Imbuing his voice with life vitality, he replied, "Since I'll die no matter what, I have to try to find a way out. You're a sect master, so stop with the nonsense." "I'm not a sect master. I am the Lord of the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom." The outside world had assumed that the Heavenly Evil sect was a sect force, but no one dared to speak of the Heavenly Evil sect in front of Eddie. Generally, they would call it the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom. HMPH. How shameless you are to claim to be the Lord of the Divine Kingdom. Zen sneered. "You're already a dead man, but you're still trying to get on my nerves. I'll make sure you die a miserable death then." Eddie suddenly increased his speed. The fist radiance in his hand started to flicker, and a powerful aura began brewing inside his body. The moment he found an opening, he would make his move. Feeling Eddie's power, Margaret turned pale. Her face was filled with grief. She was afraid that she would really die on Zen's shoulder today. However, she hadn't expected that red dots of light would suddenly shoot out from Zen's body. It was none other than Zen's sword spirit. Once Lavender took on her complete form, she stood close to Margaret and, with a mocking expression on her face, gave Margaret a smirk. After that, she took the middle-grade sacred spear from Zen's hand and charged at Eddie. She must be Zen's transformed sword spirit, Margaret thought to herself. She had heard that Zen had a very special sword spirit, but why did his sword spirit have expressions? And why had she looked like she was laughing at her? Maybe it was just an illusion. Margaret began to wonder whether her eyes were playing tricks on her. Chapter 679, It all looked fishy. Lavender turned around and darted towards Eddie with a spear in her hand. The next moment, she thrust the spear at Eddie. A mid-grade sacred weapon. Eddie's eyes widened in amazement. There were only a few low-grade sacred weapons in the central region. How could he not be envious when he saw Zen's sword spirit wielding a mid-grade sacred weapon? But at the same time, there was a hint of doubt in Eddie's mind. Didn't Zen's sword spirit use a huge sword? How did it suddenly become a spear? Zen's luck was truly beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Not only had he broken through to the virtual tribulation realm, he'd even managed to obtain a mid-grade sacred weapon. It's a good weapon, but it's a pity that this mid-grade sacred weapon will come into my hands in the end. All of your luck and your secrets will belong to me. Eddie was certain that Zen was hiding a huge secret. If he found out what it was, he would be able to become an emperor. And that was not all, he would even be able to attain greater power in the future. Eddie's ambition would not be confined only to the central region. There existed 4 divine kingdoms on the other side of the chaotic ocean of stars. The world was boundless. Eddie had been constantly conquering regions his whole life, and his final goal was to reach the pinnacle of the world. Defeating Zen was the most crucial step for him to reach success. Lavender's spear was right in front of him, but Eddie did not hesitate to counterattack. A brownish-yellow light flashed on his fist and shot towards Zen. Humph! Break into pieces. Lavender wasn't scared. The long spear suddenly jolted and emitted a wave of formless energy. An astonishing power burst forth from it and immediately destroyed the radiance emitting from Eddie's fist. Eddie looked at Lavender in utter disbelief. How did Zen's sword spirit become so powerful? True, Eddie hadn't employed his full strength in this punch, but if a mere sword spirit managed to block his attack, it was incredible. How could he not be astounded? Lavender looked at Eddie wickedly, surprised. You can actually speak. Eddie's jaw dropped when he heard her voice. How could a sword spirit speak? He was baffled. He had seen Zen's sword spirit before. Although this particular one's sword dance had been incomparably exquisite, it didn't seem extraordinary to Eddie back then. The spear skills that the sword spirit had displayed were impeccable. Eddie was astonished beyond words. However, Eddie had recovered from the shock quickly. His expression became serious. He realized that the man before him was not as easy to defeat as he once thought he would be. He could no longer treat Zen as an amateur warrior who had just entered the virtual tribulation realm. It was just like in the past, when Zen was only a martial artist at the illuminating soul realm, and yet he was able to defeat a martial artist at the primary stage of internal elixir realm. In fact, at that time, even a martial artist at the middle stage of internal elixir realm was no match for him. You have surprised me, observed Eddie calmly but grimly. His face revealed confidence and he exuded a domineering aura. As the #1 cultivator in the central region, I have not been so impressed with anyone in a long time. What a pity, Zen. You came back too early. If you had come 2 or 3 years later, I really would be no match for you. Ha ha. Eddie's aura became heavier and heavier, creating a suffocating effect on the people around. It felt like countless boulders were falling from the skies and crushing everyone. Many of the warriors in the ethereal city felt their hearts tremble vehemently. Their eyes were filled with fear as they looked up at the sky. As for the thousands of common folks in the ethereal city, they felt like they had been struck by something. Their heads became heavy and their eyes dulled. One by one they slumped to the ground, unable to get up. After several hours, they managed to open their eyes, but they were still in a daze, not knowing what had transpired. But what Eddie had told Zen was absolute trash. Zen knew it would be best if he returned after he reached a higher level of cultivation. If he had become a top-level warlord in the Tower of Sin, he would be able to defeat Eddie, and might have even had the chance to kill him. But he didn't have the luxury of time on his side. If it were not for Zen's return, Eddie would have captured the young Miss Shi of the Shi clan and he would have set up his lustful demon array. What was more, if he hadn't returned, Eddie would stand a good chance of breaking through in the life and death realm. And once he became a powerful master of the Soul Sea realm, it would be impossible for Zen to defeat him. A mere life and death realm martial artist dares to claim to be the #1 cultivator in the central region. It's making me crack up. Lavender sneered and a dignified aura emitted from her. She didn't mean to release the aura, but the mighty aura naturally exuded from her as she had been the supreme queen for a long time. Although her aura was not as imposing as Eddie's, at that moment, he felt inferior to her. "You're only a sword spirit. How dare you have the nerve to be so arrogant in front of me?" Eddie threw another punch. Lavender laughed, thrusting out the spear and obstructing another attack. Currently, Eddie was a warrior at the 4th level of the life and death realm. 1 year ago, he had gone through the 4th tribulation of the life and death realm and his power had increased since. According to the ranking system in the Sea God continent, Eddie was already a 4th level war sage. But he was so strong that he wasn't just a common war sage. He was much stronger than Malcolm, who Zen had encountered in the dark nether cave. Eddie had put all his strength into this punch, releasing the brownish-yellow light, which was filled with the power of the Earth Law. The radiance emitted from his fist was substantial, as if it had turned into a real substance that could be touched, instead of an abstract phenomenon. Seeing this, Lavender quickly dissipated into specks of red light and zoomed backwards along with her spear towards Zen. Lavender's goal was only to hinder Eddie's attack. After returning to Zen's side, the red dots of light condensed again. Her slender figure rematerialized, together with the long spear, which she held in her arms. Zen was already escaping, but the route he followed was very strange. He was originally planning to run out of the city, but at this moment, he was heading in the opposite direction. He was actually circling the outer perimeter of the ethereal city. Holding the spear in her hands, she set her sharp eyes on Margaret, staring at her insolently with a faintly mocking expression. She had long since considered Margaret to be a pain in the rear. Margaret was a delicate and charming young girl, but at the same time, she never knew when to stop and was full of herself. Lavender was hot-tempered, and she would have killed this woman the first time she saw her. That way she wouldn't have become the burden that she was on Zen now. Zen was weaker than Eddie right now, but it was not difficult for him to escape using his full strength. But, he still had to carry his burden when he escaped. Lavender knew Zen well. He wouldn't kill an innocent person recklessly, and he also had a soft spot for women. So she couldn't kill this girl, it would only anger Zen more. Why are you looking at me like that?" Margaret felt flustered under Lavender's menacing gaze. Lavender sneered, "You are not afraid of death, right? Why are you still holding on to Zen so tightly?" At first, Margaret was not very happy about being carried by Zen, however, as he was flying extremely fast, she had now firmly and instinctively grabbed his shoulder. Margaret's face darkened. She did not know how to respond to Lavender's jibes. She paused to think, and an idea struck her. Her stubborn temper rose again. "Zen, let me down," she commanded. "Let you down?" Lavender blinked and said, "Let you off so that Eddie can catch you and set up the lustful demon array. You aren't important, but Yan is 100 times more important than you." From Zen's point of view, it was indeed so. It didn't matter to him whether Margaret was dead or alive. He only wanted to take her away for the sake of his sister. Then just kill me." It was then that Margaret truly understood that there was no other path in front of her. She was either to die or just to tolerate all this. "Lavender, stop, that's enough for her," Zen said nonchalantly. He didn't know why Lavender was intentionally irritating Margaret. She might be doing it just to mock the young lady and make him give up on her and, maybe even kill her. But Zen would not let that happen. Although the world of martial artists was cruel, Zen could choose what he could and couldn't do. Lavender's solution would indeed be the safest and easiest one, but Zen did not want this innocent young girl to lose her life. He circled in the sky above the ethereal city with Margaret in his arms. Meanwhile, Eddie was closing the distance between them. Just as Zen leapt into a palace-like building in the ethereal city, he suddenly stopped and turned around to face Eddie, a strange smile playing on his face. Eddie became more alert when he saw Zen stopping suddenly. This kid couldn't have just given up and wait to be captured. It all looked fishy. Chapter 680, Dragon Trapping Rope. Zen seemed to be heading outside the ethereal city and Eddie was glad to see him do that. As he did so, he sent a message to Simon using the message rune, asking him to help seize Zen with him together. But the truth was Zen did not escape from the ethereal city. Instead he was flying around the city. Naturally, Eddie was wary of him. "What are you worried about?" Zen asked with a smirk. He was a mere 1,000 feet from Eddie. Eddie's expression darkened. He looked around carefully, but did not discover anything suspicious. However, he couldn't quell the doubt in his heart, which grew even stronger when he saw Zen's smile. The two of them now stood still, staring at each other. Since that's the case, I'll be leaving now. Zen turned to leave. Seeing that Zen was about to leave, Eddie was immediately angered. He suspected that this was a kind of double bluff. He had no choice but to activate his life vitality. He suddenly accelerated, and zoomed towards Zen at a high speed. Attack! As he watched Eddie arrive in the air above the palace, Zen let out a loud shout. Under Eddie, rays of light suddenly burst out from the palace. Little by little, the rays converged to form lines. All streets, within a 500 feet radius released a red light. It looked as though the sun had descended on the ground. The streets connected and evolved into a gigantic rune. At the same time, the space law power suddenly reverberated within the palace. There were a few flashes of incandescent light, and Brent, Robin and the septuplets of ethereal spirit appeared. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The rays of light formed countless small dragons in the huge rune formed by the streets. They soared up to the sky and surrounded Eddie at lightning speed. Some dragons circled his limbs, while the others wrapped themselves around his body. In the blink of an eye, the small dragons had trapped him completely. I've long heard about Arnold's peerless relic hidden within the ethereal spirit sect other than the illusory array. Today, I finally saw it, the dragon trapping rope. It really is extraordinary, Zen praised. He hadn't witnessed the power of the illusory array of the ethereal spirit sect. However, the power of this dragon trapping rope was something that he sincerely admired. The central region didn't belong to the upper world. Unlike Zen, who was able to obtain the inheritance of the divine texture, Arnold did not have any predecessors from whom he could learn. He could only rely on himself to understand and create the runes. Even so, he was able to display the full potential of the rune technique. Zen could tell from the power of the dragon trapping rope that it was not inferior to a 3-star divine texture. Brent and Robin suddenly passed through the void and arrived in front of Zen. The septuplets of ethereal spirit also slowly flew into the air. The 7 of them were already on guard, holding their long swords and facing Eddie. In addition to Brent and the septuplets of ethereal spirit, there were 2 other disciples of the ethereal spirit sect, who were escorting a green-clothed female servant. Margaret, on the other hand, had broken free of Zen's grasp and was retreating a few steps, glaring fiercely at him. Then, she flew towards the 2 disciples of the ethereal spirit sect. "What are you doing? Why did you capture Lindsay? Let her go," she demanded. A bitter expression appeared on Brent's face as he said, "Margaret, she is Eddie's spy." "That's impossible. Lindsay has been with me since childhood, and is extremely close to me. How can she be one of Eddie's people?" Margaret's face was filled with disbelief. Hearing her words, Zen couldn't help but sigh, a bitter smile playing on his lips. Lavender, however, rolled her eyes and whispered to Zen, "It's best to kill this idiot. Her living in this world is such a waste of food." Lindsay indeed grew up together with Margaret, and they were as close as sisters. She was also a nature creature. Getting her to betray Margaret was a piece of cake for Eddie. He didn't even need to do it himself. Darius had done everything for him. "Margaret, stop messing around," scolded Brent. Now even he could not hold it in any longer. "But Lindsay is." Margaret was still unconvinced. Swoosh! An invisible spear light shot out suddenly. Even the septuplets of ethereal spirit and Robin were wary of it. The spear light was zooming towards Margaret. The spear light grazed Margaret's cheek and cut off a strand of hair near her ear. It left a thin scar on her face and she started bleeding. "If you continue with your nonsense, I'll definitely kill you," Lavender threatened. She looked and sounded serious about carrying out her threat. Lavender seemed like a devil from hell to Margaret. She immediately clammed up. Robin's heart ached when he noticed the cut on his daughter's face, but he couldn't say anything. "Ha ha, I thought the ethereal spirit sect, the #1 sect in the world, was rather weak because Xander had been hiding all this time. It turns out that all of you had planned for this a long time ago. Nice job. This is really interesting. Ha ha." Eddie, still trapped in the dragon trapping rope, suddenly started laughing maniacally. Eddie had led over 10,000 warriors of his divine kingdom to surround the ethereal spirit sect, but Xander had been stubbornly staying within the sect. Xander had acted as if he was afraid of Eddie and didn't dare to fight against him. In reality, Eddie's movements and plans had long been monitored by the ethereal spirit sect, and Xander had chosen to play it safe. Actually, Margaret was just bait to attract Eddie. Otherwise, Xander would definitely not have left her in the She clan's castle. Instead, he would have let her hide inside the ethereal spirit sect at least for a while. Xander had originally planned to assign Brent to help Margaret escape and led Eddie to the dragon trapping rope. However, Brent had just stepped into the virtual tribulation realm. While he was proficient in the space law, he might not be able to smoothly complete the mission. Coincidentally, Zen had appeared at the right time. However, Zen didn't know about the ethereal spirit sect's plan when he first entered the She clan's castle. Robin and the others had acted out a scene, and eventually forced Margaret to leave with Zen. As her personal servant, Lindsay naturally knew about this. While everyone was having lunch in the She clan's castle, it appeared that they were laughing loudly on the outside, but they were actually secretly communicating with each other using their life vitality. Margaret and Lindsay had not joined them for lunch, but there was a high chance that Lindsay was not the only spy lurking in the She clan, so everyone was very careful. By the time Lindsay had secretly lit the message rune, Zen had already agreed to their plan. He rushed into Margaret's room and pretended to leave in a hurry. Meanwhile, Eddie had already received the news and rushed over from outside the ethereal city. From start to finish, Margaret was the only person who didn't know about their plan. As foolish as she was, she now understood that right from the start, she was just a bait. She thought that she was valued and doted upon by everyone in the She clan. Whether it was her great-grandpa, her father or the other elders of the She clan, they all spoiled her and treated her well. She never thought that in the end, she was just a pawn in their games. How could you treat me this way? Margaret's eyes were blurry with tears. She looked miserable, but nobody was paying attention to her as everyone's focus was Eddie. Eddie, you're so arrogant even when you're about to die. The ethereal spirit sect is known as the #1 sect in the world. Do you really think that it earned this reputation just like that? Or that it's just hype? Roared the leader of the septuplets of ethereal spirit, pointing his long sword at Eddie. There was no fear in Eddie's eyes as he continued to sneer, indeed. You are a bit smarter than I thought, but unfortunately you are no match for me. With that, a black mist erupted from between his brows. It instantly enveloped him, as well as the dragon trapping rope. The mist seemed to be corroding the dragon trapping rope. Isn't the dragon trapping rope able to ban someone from using the life vitality? How is Eddie still able to use it? That isn't life vitality. It must be some sort of secret technique that doesn't require the use of life vitality. We can't let him destroy the dragon trapping rope. Kill him, now. The ethereal spirit sect had planned this for a long time. They were heavily relying on Arnold's dragon trapping rope to kill Eddie. Although this move was risky, once he was killed, the ethereal spirit sect would have unparalleled achievements. Without Eddie, the heavenly evil divine kingdom would collapse on its own. It was for this reason that Zen had agreed to cooperate with the ethereal spirit sect. After all, he shared the same goal with the ethereal spirit sect. The dragon trapping rope was extremely powerful. It was said that even a warrior at the life and death realm had no way of escaping after being trapped within it. But Eddie had managed to outwit it using a secret technique. This scene caused anxiety in everyone, including the septuplets of ethereal spirit. With their swords raised, 6 of them retreated while the rest one advanced. The array formed by the septuplets of ethereal spirit was also their strongest technique. The leader collected the life vitality and sword intent of the other 6 people, and suddenly, a sword light erupted. Although he was only a warrior at the late stage of the virtual tribulation realm, the power of his sword was now comparable to the full force of a warrior at the life and death realm.